Yes, we'll call pretty quickly here. We'll call public comment. It'll be the third item on the agenda. We'll be there in a couple minutes. What are you here to talk about? Okay. They vary. And then what was the second item? Sorry, we're running just a few minutes late, but I would like to call this February 5th, 2018 meeting of the Whitefish City Council to order. I wanted to thank everyone for coming tonight to participate in your local government. With that, we'll start with our Pledge of Allegiance, and I'll ask my friend Tony Viseth to lead us tonight. Thank you, Tony. I do have one item to add to the agenda. This will be item 11B, which will be a continuation of our work session item number 5, just at least the ability to reserve the right to continue discussions regarding our Highway 93 South Corridor Plan, which is in draft form, and in particular review of the study area boundary as well as the committee makeup, if that's okay with the council. With that said, we'll move on to item 3, which is communications from the public, and this is time set aside for the public to comment on items that are on the agenda but not advertised as a public hearing or anything you'd wish to bring to the attention of the council. And just for the record, your name and address when you approach the podium. And Suzanne, this would be the time where if you'd like to address the council, you're welcome to step up to the podium.
My name is Suzanne Brooks. I live on 120 East 1st Street. 1st Street between the river and Baker Street is just a 3-block street, and there are no speed limit signs on that street. But I do grocery shopping at the Safeway grocery store, and I go down Baker and back up Baker, and there are signs on Baker Avenue that say 25 miles an hour. And anytime I'm driving on Baker, I usually have cars riding right on my bumper because I keep it at 25 miles an hour. Now on my street, people that are coming from across the viaduct and who want to go west on 93, many of them turn onto 1st Street so they can avoid having to stop at the stoplight. And I would say the average speed limit of cars on 1st Street, a residential street, is about 40 miles an hour. In fact, I was speaking with my neighbor this afternoon, and she said at least 40 miles an hour. And you know, usually I'll go like this to like slow down, and they wave at me like, oh, hi. And they just drive so fast. It's just, to me, it's an accident waiting to happen. So I'm wondering, number one, I talked about this several years ago when the city council was down in another building. And at that time, they put up a stop sign on 1st and Lupfer. But that was all they did about it. So it would help if they put up stop signs on O'Brien and 1st, as well as Miles and 1st. That would perhaps deter some people from using 1st Street. And since Baker is 25 miles an hour, which is a through street, I don't know why First Street would be more than 25. In fact, to me, it should be 20 miles an hour. It turns out to become a narrow street because there are a lot of people that live along there that park in front of their homes. And so there are cars on either side of the street. And when people are driving at 40 or 45 miles an hour down that street, it's just very dangerous. So that's my number one thing that I would like to see something done about. And I think maybe stop signs as well as a speed limit sign of 20 miles an hour would help, because they're always going to go over the speed limit anyway. And my second item is the abortion clinic, which just opened up in Whitefish. And as I understand it, there is no doctor involved. It's a nurse practitioner who is running the new abortion clinic. And I don't know, maybe I'm just ignorant of the facts, but I don't know that a nurse practitioner would have privileges at the local hospital if something were to go wrong with the abortion. And I just would like to see that addressed. And obviously, I'm not in favor of this abortion clinic. I think the killing of our unborn posterity is going to be something to haunt us in the future. So that's all I have to say, unless somebody has a question.
Thanks, Suzanne. We usually don't go back and forth,
Okay.
but I'll make certain to bring up the issue regarding First Street at the end of the meeting. Thanks for your comments. Who's next? Just for the audience sake, if you are here to speak on behalf of the Chamber and the Depot Park building, now would be the opportunity since it's not advertised as a public hearing. Mary.
Good evening. I'm here speaking on behalf on this item, Citizens for Bear Flathead, 35 4th Street West in Kalispell. You should have a item that was public comment that is asking you to amend your minutes tonight to accurately reflect the comments that I made during public comment at the January 22nd meeting, and I've included wording that I would suggest be amended into your minutes so that that accurately reflects what I said. Do you have the comments that I'm referring to?
We do.
Okay. And additionally, you have under your own rules the ability to reconsider that item if one of you so chooses to bring that back, and I would encourage you to, I hope by now you've had time to adequately look at the materials I presented, and would ask you to look at that again. And then on a totally separate matter, I will be forwarding you an email here shortly, and so this is just kind of a heads up. I think you're seeing in the paper that there's some significant changes going on countywide on recycling in terms of the materials that can be taken. Fortunately, you're being spared that for a little bit here in Whitefish in terms of plastics, but countywide, number 1 and number 2 plastics, as well as your steel cans, are no longer going to be locally recyclable. I think as you continue to move forward and look at your curbside recycling, when you adopted your current contract with your recycling and your garbage collection firm, I commented at that time and asked that there be a really accurate reporting and provided you examples. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to forward you the old email that I sent you a couple of years ago asking for that kind of reporting, which we're not getting. I did ask Craig to provide it, and the company just provided a very scant report. So I think it's really important for the community to be able, particularly in this time of fluctuation in markets, to really understand what's being collected. So you'll be seeing that email. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary. Leo.
I'm Leo Keene, 514 Pine Place in Whitefish. And I had to miss the last meeting the last city council meeting because I was out of town, so I was not able to make comments on the Wisconsin Avenue project. Tonight, I'd just like to express my disappointment in the approval of that project, given the multitude of public comments that I did hear in an earlier public hearing, and all the concerns about that project. I'd like to thank Andy Fury, who's not here, and wasn't it Rebecca also who did vote to not approve?
Melissa.
Oh, Melissa, was it Melissa and Andy? Excuse me, voted to not approve that project, which I think Andy summed it up very well in the original public hearing when he said, I can't see that this project is going to do Whitefish any good. I mean, that to me is a compelling reason to not approve projects like this that don't fit the character of Whitefish, that raise so many other problems like the traffic on Wisconsin Avenue is going to be horrendous. It's not a low-density project, as I believe the zoning for that area requires low-density residential, resort residential, I think. It's certainly not low density. I think there are a lot of compelling reasons to not approve the project, and I'm just disappointed. Richard commented that he wished there was some compelling reasons to not, and felt like we had some missed opportunities. We did, and I feel like we're going to have a lot of missed opportunities in this town if we roll over and approve these projects that really aren't any good for Whitefish, that don't do Whitefish any good. It's not like we're denying the property owner the right to develop their property. We're just saying we should develop this in a way that fits Whitefish and that will be good for the long-term good of Whitefish. And for that reason, I think we could have denied the project. But that's water under the bridge. But it does bring up the point of missed opportunities, and I'd like to see that we take that into account for future proposals that come before the city, that we can take that into account. Speaking of missed opportunities, I still think the city should very seriously look at the property by City Beach that is for sale across the street from City Beach. I think that's a really important piece of property to add to City Beach, to the parklands. It'd be a legacy project for the city to acquire that and expand City Beach. I'd like to see that given some thought in the future. Probably some contacts with the seller and the realtor, the agent who has the property. Some contacts might be appropriate. How do you pay for it? Maybe one way would be to not build one new street. I know Summers Avenue is coming up. I don't know what the next one after that is, but if we could put money toward parkland for one project, not build one street right away, but preserve a property that will be good for Whitefish forever, that would be a really good use of our money and a legacy project for this city council. Thank you very much.
I normally don't respond, Leo, but I will to your second comment regarding that City Beach property. Years ago, we did go out to the voters for a special election to purchase that property, and it was overwhelmingly turned down by the voters, and it was at a cost much lower than the current market rate for that piece. In terms of the resort tax, we only have 5% that's allocated annually towards parks from our total resort tax revenues, so we can't simply defer a street project and take that money that was going towards Summers Avenue and apply it for acquisition of property next to City Beach, where our hands are tied with state statute and the law governing the resort tax. So I wish we had a pot of money. I think it would be a great project
I
myself.
understand.
But,
yeah. I thought that the vote that you were talking about was regarding the other property that was sold and developed next door.
That was the property we were looking to acquire at the time.
Yes. No, I'm talking about the...
Yep, we're on the same page.
Are we on the same
we're
page?
On the same page.
Okay.
Yep.
I'll keep looking into it myself one way or another.
Creative funding mechanisms.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Leo. Who's next? Tony.
Howdy, council. Mr. Mayor, thanks for putting me on the spot. I was going through the mental Rolodex for America the Beautiful, but
Right.
the pledge is easier, so thank you. I'm here, as you know, I'm a member of the board of directors of the Whitefish Chamber. I'm here just as Tony V., citizen of Whitefish, Montana. Just wanting to talk to you guys about the value of a good building we have downtown. I understand that the park board spent time and effort putting the Depot Park master plan together many years ago, and I really love the effort they put into it and the foresight to make this thing great for everybody. And design a park for the future. Volunteers are what make this town great, like with what you guys do up here on these Monday nights. However, I think they overlooked the value of the building in Depot Park. The idea that removing that building would create a lot of open green space is a little misguided, in my opinion. It's not that much extra space, and when you already built the gazebo as part of the green space you're trying to create, I don't really understand that part of it, because we already have the gazebo there, we have that building there. And we've learned this recently with the Frank Lloyd Wright building. People get very emotional, sentimental about this kind of stuff. Once that building is gone, it will never be replaced. You can never get that building back. Even if you don't like the way it looks, even if you think maybe it could be a prettier little space there, it's still very valuable space to the business owners and the people of Whitefish, and honestly, the people that come visit Whitefish. There will never be again an opportunity to, in front of us like we have right now, to preserve and utilize a perfectly good building to generate revenue for the city and promote all of our local businesses and activities, not only businesses downtown, but businesses on Wisconsin Avenue, businesses on the South Corridor coming out of Whitefish. We are growing. The heart of Whitefish is growing. We're bigger than we used to be. And I think this building could help promote businesses throughout the entire city. And I really think, I think the council thinks that the chamber is just out to get a cheap place to live. Really, that's not just what the chamber is looking for. And that this whole effort is just for the chamber's benefit. The chamber's mission is to support and promote local businesses throughout Whitefish. This building can benefit all of our businesses by directing tourists through their doors, and that building is large enough to house a few different nonprofit organizations along the way that would be tourist related, that could help promote business in Whitefish, that could promote all of our activities. A majority of our economy, not all of our economy, because we are trying to go more towards the tech stuff and things like that, building, but a majority of our economy, like it or not, is tourist-based. Why not make it easy for our visitors to spend more money in our town by being able to go to a central area that is easy to find, to make a hotel reservation, dinner reservations, purchase tickets for a show at any of our amazing theaters and public places. Purchase tickets for the shuttle to Glacier National Park, which we're trying to make viable. What a great place to be able to go purchase tickets and promote the shuttle to Glacier, since we have too many cars going there anyway. Find out how to get to the best dog park in the county, in the country. Pick up a guide for the Whitefish Trail system that the city is able to help build. You guys have helped us create some amazing assets, the dog park, the trail system. It's no other town in Montana has done what we have done in this town with cooperative efforts between the council, the citizens, the people that really care about this place. And I commend you guys. Think of it as a Whitefish concierge, where in turn, this promotion of city businesses, entertainment, and events can generate resort tax dollars to help pay for other infrastructure improvements and can be a revenue builder. How many times have I seen people, and I took the train out of town over New Year's and came back, and how many times have I seen people get off the train and start wandering aimlessly up and down the streets of Whitefish trying to figure out, number one, where the heck they're going, what to do when they get here, looking for maybe some central location where they can go talk to somebody and get some information about what goes on in this really cool little hip town we live in. How cool would it be to be able to go to one centrally located space and reserve a room at the Garden Wall Inn? make a reservation at the Tupelo Grill, get a couple tickets to the latest show at one of our theaters, and secure a safe ride to Glacier on the shuttle, and have that interaction with a local who has some of that Whitefish grit that we're trying to preserve that bring people to our funky little town in the first place. All the while, generating even more resort tax revenue through the sale of the tickets, the reservations, the hotels, getting people to say, hey, where can I go get a coffee pot for the place I'm staying? They can get people locally involved with our local businesses. One argument will be, well, we don't need a visitor information center. People just search the interwebs these days and plan their trip on Yelp or TripAdvisor, things like that. Do you know how many times I've been burned by just using online info to plan a trip around this country and around this state? I don't care how much data you put in front of us, people still like to talk to people. That is what makes this town so special. The human touch is still alive, and when people visit our town, the one takeaway that is the most important to them is that interaction with the locals. So let's start their trip out right by giving them someone to actually talk to and guide them in their journey throughout the Flathead Valley. I know this is really a last-ditch effort, and I know there's been a little kickback about it. And I believe that most of you have already probably made up your mind and we're gonna go a certain direction. I just wanted to come in and speak, just to look at this thing from a different angle and just see what else we could maybe, if it's even a viable plan. I also understand that we can make a difference if we get involved at the grassroots level, talking to a council that's open-minded and understands everybody's different opinion in this town. I just hope and I ask that we will look at this from another angle with an open heart and open mind and see the true value of this building, not just for one organization, but for all of our visitors and all of the people that live and work and do business in this town. We can still have the most beautiful park in Montana with multiple uses. Instead of just tearing down the building, let's use a term from current culture and find a way to repurpose a great building that's already there instead of just sending it to the local landfill like other local landmarks have gone. So that's all I'm asking. Just, if we're too late, we're too late. But just if we could look at it from another angle, see the benefit of the building, and look at it as a big picture type thing for a centrally located tourist information center like most of the other resort type areas have if you go to anywhere else in the country. So that's all I'm asking. Thanks so much.
Thanks very much, Tony. Who's next?
Hello. My name is Jessica Waring. I live at 312 Edgewood Place in Whitefish. I'm a member of the Whitefish Chamber of Commerce Board. I'm also an ambassador. I've also lived here for 7 years on and off, Whitefish local. I'm new to this, so bear with me. I understand that there was a public process for the depot building, and I do not mean to take away from that process in any respect. You guys have put in a lot of time and hard work, so has city officials, so has the mayor. I think my strongest point is the fact that the information has changed since then. And because the information has changed, I do think that it does need to be looked at a second time. When it was brought up for public process, the cost of demolition was $20,000, give or take. And now it's $120,000. And when we're talking about budget and what to do with city funds, I think that there are more appropriate allocations for their funds. Being a young member of this community, a first-time home buyer who cannot purchase homes in Whitefish because of the prices, I'm concerned that there was no budgetary line item for the housing crisis in Whitefish, and that now the city has asked the chamber for funds to donate to the housing crisis. That's disconcerting to me. To me, it needs to be flip-flopped, and we need to be allocating funds to the Whitefish housing crisis to keep people here, because that's the point of being in Whitefish. And this community is to continue to build and strengthen this community instead of take away. So I don't think it's too late to expand on what Tony said. I think that there is time to reevaluate, considering that all of the information has changed in regards to how much it's going to cost to demolish this building. I propose that there could be a way that we compromise. We don't need the parking lot. It doesn't have to necessarily just be used for chamber, but look at the building because it's viable, because it's there, and because we do not need to be allocating funds to demolish the building, especially when they're $120,000, give or take. So that's my 2 cents. I appreciate and I thank you for taking the time to listen.
Thanks very much for your comments. Tom?
Excuse me, I'm just getting over a cold or whatever. Tom Gilfillan, Whitefish Pottery, 240 Central Avenue. I own a business downtown. I'm also on the board at the Chamber. You're probably going to hear a few of us tonight. I'd like to install something in you from a different angle. I know you're hearing everything that it's going to cost money to tear down the building, and we want to save the building, and all these other numbers. You've heard all that. I know you've got all that information. I'd like to see a show of hands. How many of our council members have children?
Is that appropriate?
Okay.
I don't have kids.
Okay. I didn't think so.
Sorry, Tom.
That's what, no, I understand. That's okay. I understand that if some of you have children or have had children before, there probably came a time in bringing up those children, young or old, that child came up to you with a crazy idea that you kind of rolled your eyes back at and said to yourself, not directly to your child at that time, but said to yourself, this is a crazy idea that will never fly. How come my child doesn't understand this? How come they don't see this? Well, it's probably because they were fairly young at the time. But you would never look at that child. You would never, I can guarantee that, and I don't have kids. You would never look at that child and tell them no. That can't be done. That's a crazy idea. You're crazy. It'll never come to fruition. It'll never happen. And watch them go crying out of the room. You would never do that. I know that. So you stood by them and you followed through with that idea with them, even though it was a crazy idea. Let's pull something out of a hat. Your child wanted to sell lemonade. Not a bad theory. Dad, Mom, I want to sell lemonade. The only problem is they brought up this idea in the middle of January. Just doesn't work. But you would not say no to that child. That's what we're doing here tonight. The only thing that the chamber and other entities that would like to use that building are asking you not to say no to your child and to give it a chance. Because once you wreck that building, as other people will tell you, there's nothing you're going to be able to do in replacing that building. We're never going to know how valuable that building could be to the chamber and other entities without trying it first. Go ahead and wreck it in 10 years. Go ahead and wreck it in 5 years. Tell us after that amount of time that it has not worked, because I can almost guarantee you, I hate to use the word guarantee, but I can almost guarantee you that that is going to be a 10-fold more valuable spot than it's being used for now, not to knock the city offices that it was being used for. But as Tony said, there are going to be people coming into that building and getting a response from a human being, a Whitefish human being, and that's going to be their first connection to Whitefish. Not looking up something on a phone, not walking us up to some kiosk, not something impersonal like that. They're going to get their information from a Whitefish individual. So all that I'm asking you to do is to think about possibly not ordering or approving a contract for demolition tonight, but to stop and rethink that how purposely we could repurpose that building and get a 100% turnaround out of it in its usage. That's all I'm asking you to do, is just consider how that building could turn out if you could give us a chance. Just give us a chance. Thank you very much. Oh, number two. I concur with the woman who spoke about speed limits. I asked the city council about the 45-mile-an-hour speed limit in front of the golf course about a year ago, and the council was going to check into that. I have not heard anything back about that. Not that you were going to contact me directly, but I still see it's 45 miles an hour. I go by that road every day, at least twice. I live out that way. It's too fast. 45 miles an hour is too fast. It's 35 miles up until right at the edge of the cemetery. It should be 35 miles until that next road on the right there. That's all I'm asking. All right, thank you very much.
I will look into that, Tom. Thanks.
Hello, Rebecca Norton, 530 Scott Avenue. I always hate it when you've already given public comment and then things get revisited and it's difficult. But some of you weren't on council last year when this was addressed, so I'm going to repeat some of the stuff I said last year. So bear with me if you were on council. Number one, I'm talking about the Depot Park Master Plan and the removal of the building. I don't think it's fair to the public or the process we went through to create a master plan to revisit this, especially when we've already gone through the public process and decided what we were going to do. The TIF expires in 2020, so we have 2 years to use the money to demolish the building. We did have other offers. The music school tried to move it. That would have been really cool. They couldn't get the funding. Other people could have offered to move the building, like the chamber could have offered to move the building, but as far as I know, nobody has done that. And we also had another offer on the table, which was T. Bauer was offered to demolish it out of his personal pockets. And so I don't know whatever happened to that, but he did say it in the public comment, and because I think he was involved in the park board, and it meant so much to him to follow the master plan as it was designed through extensive public process that he offered to do that at the time. We have a beautiful downtown because we worked, well, especially the Heart of Whitefish people. They hired, and the city also paid part of this. We hired really amazing architects from Portland that their whole specialty is in designing downtowns. And they were also part of this decision to remove that building. And when we had to update it recently, not recently, 3 years ago maybe, they also gave input on this. So it's not like it's suddenly a surprise. I think it came about as a possible revenue source for the city. But really, frankly, I don't think $36,000 a year is a significant amount, especially when we have to commit to 10 years and give up the right to demolish it per our plan. The chamber itself, last year I researched it. At that time, we had over 2,000 businesses based on our business licenses in Whitefish. In the chamber at that point, only 10% of, 10% of Whitefish businesses were members, and 50% of those were outside the Whitefish area. So essentially 95% of the businesses that have to have business licenses in the city of Whitefish are not chamber members. So even though I think they do a wonderful service in a lot of areas of our town, there's a lot of other ways that business is being conducted in our town. And I know Rhonda will maybe talk to this, but it is changing. So we don't always have to have an on-site presence or a visitor center to actually make an effective destination resort. I would disagree with one of the previous speakers. From what I understand, the Heart of Whitefish has always been against keeping this building since they were instrumental in the master design for this. And I'm fine with an idea of having a kiosk. I think it would be nice if we actually addressed what the people that are getting off the train actually experience. But we should be doing that consciously, not just saying that it can't work. Right. Again, I think we've gone through the public process, and I would rather we stick to the plan that the public has already vetted pretty thoroughly. Thank you.
Thanks, Rebecca. Who's next?
Good evening. Marcus Stuffy, 326 Summers Avenue. I'm also here tonight on behalf of the Chamber of Commerce. John, I want to appreciate or thank you for putting that letter together that really lined out, I think, a lot of the things on the horizon in terms of overall costs and allocation of dollars that the city, the county, the overall municipalities in the state and what those dollars look like. What I will say is, although it does explain a lot, as a business owner, as a homeowner, one thing doesn't change, and the fact is that it's becoming more and more expensive to live in Northwest Montana, Whitefish specifically. And as a result of that, sometimes you have to change, or I think we ought to be willing and able as a community to change and alleviate some of those cost hikes. I do believe $36,000 is legitimate amount of money. I think that can go a long way, especially over a 10-year period. And we're looking at thinking outside the box, looking at creating revenue sources. You've got a viable organization, willing, interested, has come to you multiple times expressing that interest and the willingness to not only occupy that building, but bring vibrance to it, viability to it, beautify it. And I think that there's a real case to be made. I would encourage all of you as counselors to consider that one last time tonight. I appreciate your time.
Thanks, Marcus. Rhonda.
Good evening. I'm Rhonda Fitzgerald, 412 Lupfer Ave. I was on the original Downtown Master Plan Committee, and that master plan had, I believe, 5 catalyst projects. And the Depot Park is the 5th of those 5 catalyst projects. And the city has completed the other 4, and they have been tremendously beneficial to the community and to the entire community, but most especially to the downtown business community. We have a vital, vibrant downtown because we followed through on those projects, even though they were very hard, lots of public process, many, many meetings back and forth. But we soldiered on, and each of those was completed in its turn. And they have rewarded our community tremendously, which proves the proof of the plan. And the plan was so good that the council undertook an update, which was adopted in 2015. And so now there are a whole nother list of catalyst projects. But the Depot Park master plan was the last of the first group and has carried forward into the second master plan update. And to start the process of acquiring the property to have a town square, which would create a tremendous vibrancy downtown, the council took some of the precious tax increment funds about 10 years ago and purchased that property from the credit union at a very steep investment. The community has invested in that property because it has a vision for what that will do, which is to create a town square environment, to link the downtown to this green space, to link the depot to the business community, and to provide a great, vital, viable community space. When the purchase was undertaken, many people, including myself, said that will never work. That building is squatting on the front door of that park, and nothing can happen with that building there. And we were assured that that building would go away. And it's time now for the building to go away. We have gone through all the processes. We have had 1 million public hearings. We have gone through planning boards. We have revisited it. We have made offers. We have extended them. We have given people chances to come back again. The building needs to go so that the city's investment in that property can come to fruition and provide the vibrancy that was envisioned. Now, I'm in the tourism business. I chair the State Tourism Research Committee. Visitor centers, brick and mortar, are a thing of the last century. They are no longer viable. The perfect analogy is Blockbuster Video. It was worth $6 billion in its day. They had thousands of stores all over the world, and Netflix put them out of business in 1 year because no one will go to a physical store and go into a brick and mortar place to rent a movie because they can get it digitally. And the same is true of travel. People get their information on their phones or their iPads. And so places that do have visitor centers are struggling to find a way to repurpose them because they just don't work anymore. So the idea that this is a forward-looking idea is wrong. Now, if the chamber would like to have a visitor center somewhere in town, great. I would definitely not argue with that. But to take something that belongs to the entire community, which has a purpose far beyond delivering information to a visitor, and destroy the ability of that investment to serve its purpose is, I think, very misguided. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Rhonda. Dan?
Good evening, Mayor, council members. Dan Graves, Board Chair of the Chamber of Commerce. I'm almost a little baffled here. We talk about the heart of Whitefish. We talk about the central business community. I thought we were Whitefish from border to border. The building would be a great location for a visitor center. And you can, I don't know how you can compare it to Blockbuster. I run a resort. 320 to 350,000 skier visits come through that place every year. Over half of them are out of town. If I just had kiosks everywhere to talk to people, you think that that resort and this town would be as important or viable? How many people that run a business here is going to get rid of a salesperson to have a kiosk? What makes Whitefish Whitefish is the people. 7,000 people go through the chamber's doors in the summer right now. That's just down the street and away from the park, from the railway, from the parking garage. What do you think that number would be if it was in the current building? And I don't see how that building separates the businesses of the city with the park area. If anything, it would link it. Think about the marketplace on Tuesday afternoons. You can't even get in about downtown. Can you imagine the people that would be rolling in those doors for more information? The chamber opened a visitor center in Glacier Park a couple of 3 years ago. And the reason why is because there was no face down there. There was brochure racks, kiosk, or whatever you want to call it. There could have been electronic stuff. People wanted to talk to a human being. I forget how many people went through that door, but Kevin would know. But it's astronomical. And it got more and more every summer. Okay? Lastly, about the master plan. I've been here 12 years in this town. Love this community. Didn't happen to be a local. Grace of God, I didn't happen to be born here. But I moved here because I wanted to be. When I got here, the town didn't look like this. I'm sure a bunch of other people have been here after that. The curbs don't look this way. The streets don't look this way. The light posts don't look this way. It's a beautiful spot, and it's developed wonderfully because of the master plan. But just because this is on the master plan doesn't mean that's it. I've been involved with a lot of master plans. Sometimes 1% of it has to change because items change. This is not about the chamber, folks, and I hope you understand this. This is not about a bunch of people that want to get under the burr under your saddle. This is because we believe that a visitor center, which benefits the entire community of Whitefish, not just the heart of Whitefish. It represents it from east to west to north to south, all down Wisconsin, all down 93 both ways. That's what we want to accomplish, is to make sure that the visitors for the entire city of Whitefish get personal information, because an electronic kiosk or Yelp or anything on your phone is not why people come here. They come here to interact. They come in here because they want to take part in the physical attributes around here. I ask you, think about this. I know you visited it before, but one of the things I'm going to leave you with this. A lot of people don't like to come to city council meetings. They don't want to be involved. You know why? Because they've got lives, they got work and everything else, and they just want to go home after a hard day's work. They need to make dinner. They need to get their beds, ready for the kids. They need to do the homework. They need to do all the chores that you guys give up to come here for, which I appreciate and everybody else does too. But sometimes the only people that come to these meetings or over and over are the same people that have an opinion and they want to drive it through. And it doesn't represent the general public out there. And I hope you understand that. I thank you for your time. With all due respect, I hope you have a wonderful evening and you consider this. Because as somebody else said, this is not about this year. Give us 5 years. If it doesn't work, fine. Then we will be the first ones to say, you know what, it didn't work. That's all I ask. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Further public comment tonight? Sure.
Again, my name is Suzanne Brooks. I live at 120 East First Street in the Railroad District. And some years ago, I don't remember, I've lived here for about 25 years. I don't remember what the reason was, but I wanted to find out some information, and I asked around, was there a Chamber of Commerce? And I was directed to a building that I think was on 93, but I'm not sure. It was a little bit off the main path, and then you had to go upstairs or up to the second floor. And it just didn't seem to me like much of a Chamber of Commerce, but I did get the answers to my questions. But it would seem to me that the building that is in Depot Park would make a wonderful welcoming center, reception center, information center. People getting off of the train could go there to get a map of the city. Just all kinds of possibilities. And it's not like you have to build a building for this information, which would be in a nice area. It's already there. And to spend, I forget the numbers, but it seemed like an extremely high amount of money to tear the building down. I just think that would be very foolish. You have a nice building, why not try the opportunity of using it for a visitor center for at least a couple of years and see if that doesn't help the businesses in town. And just, to be able to give out a map, to mention where the different restaurants are. I think that would be a wonderful opportunity for the visitors to Whitefish, and they would feel more welcome. I know I found it very difficult in my mind to think that this was a Chamber of Commerce that I had to go searching for. And that would be right there where visitors could find it. So that's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Suzanne. Further public comment tonight?
Good evening. My name is Alan Satterley. Excuse me, I've battled a cold too. I live at 1210 2nd Street East here in Whitefish. I'm on the board also of the Chamber of Commerce, but I'm also making comments just from my own perspective as a citizen of Whitefish. First of all, I'd like to commend the council and all those who are involved in the master planning process. I think taking the time to step back and have a plan is a very good thing to do. I've not been very involved for a variety of reasons in the actual process myself. I've never really been involved in the governance of a city or city council matters, but I have been involved for the last 20 years in running nonprofits and working with nonprofit boards. And I think everyone who knows me knows that I usually like to make a pretty quick decision and move forward. And sometimes I can be a bull in a china shop and I get kind of single-minded about something. But I've learned through the process of working with a group of volunteers and a group of people who bring a diverse group of opinions to a matter, is that sometimes it pays to step back and consider all the options. There's a reason it's called a master plan. It's because it's a plan. I think you can look at any dictionary online or in the old-fashioned paper book and see that a plan doesn't mean that you have to do things a certain way. A plan is a plan. And I think it's not unreasonable to ask you to step back and at least one more time, take it under consideration with new council members on board, and just make sure it's the decision we want to make for the city of Whitefish. So thanks very much.
Thanks for the comments, Alan.
Hello, my name's Deidre Corson. I live at 213 Whitetail Lane in Whitefish, and I appreciate you guys listening to all of us on our different opinions regarding the Depot Park building. But I am here a couple representations. My first one is speaking on behalf of North Valley Music School, and that we did try and move forward with the Depot Park building and move it, and under the circumstances, it did not work out for us. We are in our 21st year of operation, and I know that there are probably close to 90 nonprofits in this area that are looking for places and don't have the means and the ways of North Valley Music School, and we've been around for 20 years. So I think the opportunities that are here to again look at the possibilities for the Depot Park building are huge. I've talked to several of my friends who are involved with nonprofits and are, you know, they look for office spaces. There are 9 offices in that building. A visitor center is a great idea. It might not take up the whole building, which might be more resource for the city to have more than just the visitor center there, but maybe some other nonprofits or other businesses that are looking for a smaller space that would help benefit the city. And then on the other side here, for personal reasons, recently with the recycling changes, it makes me want to throw up to throw a plastic milk jug in the garbage and throw a tin can. I've been recycling most of my life. If it wasn't into a recycling center, it was just reusing plastic, glass, however we can. I think we live in an area where people are resourceful and they don't want to throw things away. And I think, you know, to bounce off what's already been said with the child's dreams, you know, are you going to say no to a child? I think a lot of people would be here to say something if they could, that there are so many opportunities for that empty jar. You know, you can put pennies in it, you can put buttons in it, it's a storage unit, you could put water in it and make music. I think there's an opportunity to create something that I know we've thought about a million times in this town, but maybe try it one more time. It's not a bank, it's not city offices, it's something else. And I think passing up that opportunity is maybe not the best idea. So I'd like to say, let's keep recycling and reusing and reinventing. So thank you so much for all your time and energy on this, and to the officials as well.
Thanks, Deidre. Further comment tonight on this or any other matter? Further comments? We'll go ahead and close communications from the public, but I'll stay with the public. Any volunteer board reports from the audience? Any volunteer board reports from the council? Ron, excuse me.
I thought somebody else was getting up, so, sorry, slow to get
Quite
to
all
my
right.
feet there. Mr. Mayor and City Council, I'm Ron Brunk. I live at 640 West 5th Street. I'm the president of the Parks and Recreation Board, your Parks and Recreation Board. And I wanted to come and speak on behalf of that board tonight because of the letter that you've heard a lot of comment on, the letter from the chamber regarding the Parks building and the possible demolition of it. I wrote everything out because I don't know why it is I can sit on the other side of that bench and I feel at ease, but I always feel nervous on this side. So I wrote it all out so I could read it, but I'm going to digress for a moment because reading back through, you have an extensive packet from Maria on the history of all this and all the different minutes and things, and I've read through a lot of that. I have empathy for you because that was just one piece of your packet. But reading through that, I was the one who made the motion back, I think in June of 2016, to keep the building for a 5-year period. So it's a little interesting that I'll be here speaking against it, keeping that building. And I'm also a member of the chamber, a business owner in Whitefish, member of the chamber. From what Rebecca said, I guess I'm a minority, but I do own a business in Whitefish and member of the chamber. I'm a member of the Heart of Whitefish and a member of the Whitefish Visitor and Convention Bureau. So we're involved in all this, and so I have personal feelings on it, but what I wanted to mostly bring up tonight is the Parks Board position of this, because it's, you've commissioned us to manage and take care of the parks, and this is more than just a building, but it's Depot Park, it's one of our parks. So, as I said, Maria's given you a really extensive packet. I hope you've had a chance to read through it and sift through it all, but I'm just going to emphasize a few things. First, the public process has run its course. We feel at the Parks Board, between 2011 and 2016, there have been numerous public hearings and open houses on this park. From the Whitefish Downtown Business Master Planning meetings that I attended, from the Depot Park Steering Committee, I think held 3 open houses on it. We held a public hearing at the Parks Board on it. You guys held a public hearing on it. So I feel like the process has run its course. There's been lots of time to speak up on this. I believe that it's time to move on and implement this plan. The plan isn't simply to remove the building. That's a piece of it, but the plan is to improve or enhance Depot Park. The phase that we're in would enhance or improve about 1/3 of the park. It's a fairly big impact with sprinkling and lighting and electrical and some things. So the removing of the building is just one piece of that. This is a plan that was unanimously approved by the Parks Board at our December 2017 meeting, so just a couple of months ago. That plan went out for bid just a few weeks ago, and those bids are going to be opened on Friday. So to stop the process and change directions at this time would be expensive. And it could delay this project beyond the time frame that we have funds to use because we're using TIF funds, and as was stated, that, and you probably know, will run out in 2020. So I really believe that that to make that change at this time is not the proper thing to do, and at this late date, I just really believe it's simply wrong. We've spent at this point in excess of $50,000 to design and engineer the plan for this park. To stop it at this point is going to cost us a great deal. And I also don't believe it's very respectful of the decisions that have been made by all these different boards. One line that I'd like to read to you that's from the master plan, I quote, "As decided through the public process in the Whitefish Downtown Business District Master Plan, supported by the Depot Park Steering Committee, all the permanent occupied structures will be removed." That's what was written when that plan was written and that building was occupied then. So I want to ask you to support the decision of the Parks Board, the unanimous decision of the Parks Board at its December meeting. Support the decision of the Depot Park Master Plan Steering Committee. Support the decision of the Downtown Business District Master Plan. And I ask that you would deny that request tonight to save that building. And let's move forward with things. Pray that the bids come in under budget. I know it's a bit of a miracle by our track record, but we really hope that the bids will come in under budget this Friday. We could open those bids. award those bids, you could award those bids, and we could move forward with redesigning, or excuse me, not redesigning, but implementing the design of the Depot Park Master Plan. Thanks for your support of the parks in Whitefish, the super excellent Parks Department that we have and Park Director, and for your support of the Parks Board. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Ron. Quickly, Rebecca, thanks.
Just about the Wisconsin Avenue corridor, we're getting some feedback about the development that's already been approved out there, but the planning board will be looking at the, what's it called, Richard? Our plan.
Wisconsin corridor plan.
Yeah, the Wisconsin corridor study plan. I think it's February 20th is the next time. It's the 15th, the third Thursday of the month. And so anybody that lives along there or has concerns like Leo, please come because it's not finalized and we would like input.
Thank you, Rebecca. Once more, any further public comment tonight? We'll turn back to council for volunteered board reports.
The Climate Action Plan committee meeting that was scheduled for 5 o'clock tomorrow has been canceled because committee members are working individually or in very small groups to work on the edits and to continue writing their various sections of the plan. Bike Ped met this morning, had their regular meeting, and nothing terribly important to report out of that meeting.
Thank you, Richard. Further board reports? Katie.
The Flathead Emergency Service Communications Center 911 Funding Committee met. We are once again drawing closer and closer to finding an amicable solution for long-term financial stability for our 911 center. Hopefully within the next 2 months we'll have something to report back and kind of start laying out the guidelines for. Also, our LLAC Legacy Lands Advisory Committee met last week, and we were able to review and vote in the LLAC partnership responsibilities and then our also working agreements. And then I will bring up that we may potentially need to add it on to an agenda item or into the council packet just for review by all members of the council so they are aware of our working relationship with Whitefish Legacy Partners in the city and how we've outlined it.
Thanks, Katie. Further reports from the council? I have one brief one on, I went and attended the Montana chapter of the American Fisheries Society, both for my real profession, but also my volunteer position here at the city. And one of the topics or the symposium was aquatic invasive species management. And there were a host of federal and state and nonprofit organizations in attendance at the meeting, which was held in Butte. And I presented on our local AIS program for 2017, including the statistics that were gathered, Maria, as well as the lessons learned and kind of moving forward. So I think it was well received, and I think we're doing a lot as a community to address the threat of aquatic invasive species introduction into our lake, and I hope that we continue to support those efforts because I think we're certainly being recognized statewide as a leader in that effort. So thanks to Maria and the Whitefish Lake Institute and everyone involved with that program to date. With that said, we'll move on to our consent agenda. Any changes or additions to the January 16th minutes? Richard.
Yes, I have 3 corrections to the minutes, if I may, or do you want a motion first?
Let's go ahead with a motion, and then you can add a friendly amendment.
I'll move to approve the minutes.
I second.
And the consent agenda?
And the consent agenda.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then I have some
Go ahead.
additions or some corrections to the minutes, if I could. On page 47, towards in the bottom third, at the top of the bottom third, Councilor Sweeney made a motion seconded by that'd be seconded or second by Councilor Williams to affirm the council's, not the court's, appointment. Then on page 48, the third paragraph from the bottom, it says, Councilor Sweeney said he would like to have a review of whatever our current annexation, then to the extent, and I think that Councilor Sweeney said the extent rather than the extend. And then on the next to the last paragraph, Mayor Melfeld asked the Fire Chief Page, asked, and Fire Chief Page said he presented to the council the plan for and the word here is Bakken, but it should be Bakken, B-A-K-K-E-N, oil.
Thank you, Richard. On that note, any additional comments or edits? Frank?
Do we need to include the edits on Mary's comments, or, I mean, and for the public, keep in mind that the minutes are a reflection of actual testimony as opposed to hoped for testimony. And do we need to include Mary's changes as well to her testimony? And I think we probably do.
I think we do, and as long as my friendly is open, would you like me to do that?
Please.
And I would also like to include the wording that Mary Flowers submitted for Citizens for a Better Flathead in the February 2nd, 2018 memo. That's when it was received by the city. And do you want me to read that whole thing?
I don't think so. You can just reference page 1 of Mary's memo. I think that would be fine.
That's sufficient for you, Michelle. Thank you.
I think just to that point, I'm fine adding those clarifications, Mary, but we did years ago, and I don't know, I'm not very well versed in the types of minutes that Michelle takes, but we did elect a number of years ago to take less detailed minutes, understanding that we have the audio and video to back up the record if needed. So apologize that was misrecorded, but it was probably the intent of Michelle, if I'm not mistaken. With that said, we do have a motion on the table as amended. Further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and that motion does carry unanimously, which brings us down to item 6, which will be our public hearings this evening, and we do have 4 public hearings advertised. We'll start with item 6A, which is consideration of a request from Cloud9 Ranch for a preliminary plat for a 14-lot subdivision located at 633 Colorado Avenue. Bailey.
Good evening. So as the mayor stated, this is a request for a preliminary plat for 14 lots on 4.7 acres at 633 Colorado Avenue. The site is currently developed with a single-family residence, which will remain on one of the lots. The property is zoned WR2, which is a 2-family residential district, and the Whitefish growth policy does designate this property as urban. The gross density of the subdivision is 2.978 dwelling units per acre. The lots will range between approximately 0.11 acres and 1.1 acres in size. The lots will each have frontage and driveways along Colorado Avenue or Denver Street, which are both city-maintained roads. The subdivision will be required to provide parkland dedication as recommended by the Park Board, and no subdivision variances are requested. I'll kind of go through my staff report. As I said, the property is developed with a single-family residence. It is zoned WR2. It is surrounded by residential uses on all sides, and those range between WR2, WLR, and WR3. It will be connected to all city services. We did mail a notice to adjacent landowners within 300 feet of the subject parcel, as it's a major subdivision, and that was on December 29th of 2017. We did place a sign on the property on the same day, noticed advisory agencies, and placed a legal in the pilot on January 3rd of 2018. At the time of the staff report, I had 1 public comment that was received in support of the proposal, and I have had 1 comment that was received today that's actually in opposition, and that was handed out to you, I believe, from Michelle this evening, or included for you. So just some of the highlights of the criteria. The Whitefish Fire Marshal has reviewed the project. As a condition of approval, the Fire Marshal is requiring that the driveway for the flag lot, Lot 10, should be constructed to a minimum travel surface width of 20 feet with a turnaround installed at the end due to the overall length of the proposed driveway. It's longer than what they would standard allow. Additionally, the surface width of the 20 feet must be maintained in all seasons for emergency access. And there are some concerns, since the flag lot is 21.5 feet wide, that flag portion may need to be widened in order to accommodate a larger driveway width, but that is something that could be accommodated if needed. The first 80 feet of all the driveways within the subdivision have to be paved, and the remainder shall be a suitable fire surface. The property is within the city limits. It's within the city's fire district. Pretty much the entire town is within the wildland urban interface, so most of those standards all apply. As I said, it is served by city water and hydrants and will meet all fire department emergency access requirements. The lots are proposed, as I said, to access off either Colorado Avenue or Denver Street. There is not an internal subdivision road. Both Colorado and Denver are paved city-maintained roads. The applicant is proposing individual driveways for each lot. However, after discussion with Public Works Department, staff is recommending a condition that the lots minimize the number of individual driveways on both streets through the use of shared driveways. And this is due to the required distances between driveways and intersections, which is part of our city's engineering standards. So we are just requiring that they have that discussion and look at those actual measurements to see which driveways actually meet that 40 feet and which ones might have to be combined to meet those standards. Additionally, no frontage improvements are being required along Denver Street, as the Public Works Department has stated this road is located high enough on the city's priority or reconstruction priority list that it will most likely be completed within the next 5 years. There are concerns that any upgrades at this point could cause problems with future grading, and they'd rather deal with that later than have them make a problem now that they'd have to fix later on. The applicant is required to pay cash in lieu of sidewalks along along Denver Street. Colorado Avenue already has a shared bike and pedestrian path that's on the west side of the road. The proposed subdivision will generate approximately 140 daily trips, so no traffic study is required, as that's less than the 200 threshold. Trying to just hit the highlights. I don't want to repeat myself. There are no mapped crucial wildlife habitat or seasonal migration corridors on this site, although, as with a lot of other places in town, deer and other animals may migrate through the site. This area of town is well known for having high groundwater. However, it does depend on the specific property location. Groundwater monitoring was not completed prior to the application submittal, and that is included as a condition of approval. We do have a note that if high groundwater is present, this obviously may impact their overall design of the project and the number of lots. Additionally, if the groundwater, we do have a standard in the zoning regulations and within the engineering that if the groundwater is within 6 feet of the ground surface level, I can't talk tonight, a note shall be placed on the face of the plat that basements or crawl spaces shall not be permitted. And we included it in a subdivision just further north of this as well. So. Additionally, because of high groundwater, this may impact the applicant's stormwater detention plans. The official review of the stormwater plans will be completed by Public Works after approval of the preliminary plat. They have completed a preliminary review, and they are recommending that the stormwater detention area be located in a common area or on its own lot for ease of access for maintenance. They've just seen problems where stormwater is put on the back of a homeowner's property, and over time you either have access problems or people don't maintain them, or it can just cause difficulties in the future. If a separate location is not feasible, then they're recommending a shared access or easement for access and maintenance to be created as a condition of final plat. As I said, the project will be connected to city water and sewer. Those will be extended to meet the site and be designed and constructed to city standards. So the subdivision regulations do require parkland dedication. The total amount for parkland required at this time is 17,592.42 square feet. That could change just depending on, if the lots had to get reconfigured for stormwater, for example, or the flag lot got moved. Some of that could change it because it's based off of the size of the lots determines those different percentages. So that's just an estimated number for purposes. The final will be determined at final plat. However, the applicant did present the project to the Whitefish Park Board on November 14th. Since this project is adjacent to the Cottonwood subdivision just to the north, which had a park that was dedicated, it's currently an HOA park. It was dedicated in the, have to think southeast corner of the property. They would like to see this parkland be located in the northeast to connect to that park. However, because there was some concern with maintenance of it, and there's not going to be an HOA for this subdivision, they want dedication of that now, rather than waiting until it was going to become 1 acre. So the park to the north is in the HOA currently until the overall parkland in this area becomes 1 acre in size. Hopefully that explained that enough. I can try again. Additionally, they requested a 10-foot wide pedestrian easement along the eastern property line of Lot 9 and to facilitate access to that parkland from Denver Street. Unlike the parkland, the easement would not be dedicated to the city, but would stay an easement in perpetuity between the city and all future landowners. And we have, as a condition of approval, that easement agreement between the city and that Lot 9 future owners be a condition of approval for final plat. Sorry. So the growth policy does identify this parcel as urban on the future land use map. That designation is primarily for the WLR, WR1, and R2. So this is, it does comply with the growth policy. The proposed lots do exceed the minimum square footage for that zone, and it does appear that all setbacks and lot coverage can be met, and that would be confirmed at the time of building permit. So, back to my front page. So staff recommended approval of the preliminary plat subject to 19 conditions. The planning board held a meeting on January 18th, 2018. The applicant's representative spoke at that meeting. No other members of the public commented at the public hearing. The draft minutes are on page 85 of your packet, if you'd like to read them. Following the hearing, the planning board voted unanimously to approve the application. I realize I just said voted unanimously, so sorry about that. They voted to approve it. And since planning board meeting, as I said, we've had one additional comment that was received in opposition to the project. So I do have a proposed motion, and I did want to state that I did want to go over a couple of conditions just to highlight the ones I talked about. So condition number 7 is the groundwater monitoring be required. Condition number 9 is about the parkland with the percentages, so not, you know, that number will be determined at the time of final plat for sure. The 10-foot wide pedestrian easement is condition 10. The minimizing the number of individual driveways with public works is condition number 11. And then condition number 12 is that the driveway for the lot 10, the flag lot, be a minimum of 20 feet in width and maintained in all seasons. And then the fee in lieu of sidewalks would be paid final plat is condition 13. So those are the project-specific conditions. So the applicant's representative is here this night as well, but I am happy to answer any questions that you have. So.
Thanks, Bailey. Any questions for Bailey? Frank?
One, clarify something for me. Did I hear you say that there's going to be no homeowners association associated with this?
No.
How are we going to be able to enforce the maintenance of the stormwater retention area? And it was one of the things we do on many of these is we require that so that somebody's responsible for maintaining it.
They can create similar to a road users agreement. It's basically specific, a stormwater maintenance agreement that all lot owners would be party to, but they wouldn't have the standard CC&Rs, you know, dealing with either, you know, whatever CC&Rs can come up with. So they can have, similarly to a shared driveway agreement, it's the same type of thing. So it runs with the lots that it's part of, and those future lot owners, it would show up either with their deed or their title report, things like that. So we have seen it happen a couple places in town. It's not necessarily standard, but it is doable legally. So
I understand it's doable legally. My question is, if that's the circumstance, how do we, as a city, viably enforce the maintenance of that? Because we've seen any number of these things go to and become eyesores and become really, and with nobody in charge and all sharing it, it's a harder shotgun to hit something with.
I don't know. I don't even know if Craig or Angie know. I don't know if the city can be a part of those agreements or if it's just specifically between the lot owners. I don't know, I guess, what mechanism we would have to show the maintenance of that.
I guess my question is, maybe this is a broader question for you guys. When you've got a homeowners association and we've got a problem, you pick up the phone, you call the homeowners or the president of the homeowners association, and you hold the whole area responsible. Into these and they're in charge of theoretically maintaining the joint areas within the community. Without a homeowners association and one stormwater retention area that is their responsibility to maintain, do we now have to call 14 people and say, hey, dudes, we got to get this done? What's our mechanism here? I'm looking for ease of enforcement, and so I got somebody to,
Yeah. I mean, I guess, Frank, we could be party to the agreement. We
I
generally
don't want to be party to the agreement.
I
That's
don't
not
either.
Yeah, I don't want to be a party to the agreement really either, but we do, in the engineering standards, allow for an alternate, a legally alternate substitute, if that's not saying the same word twice, to a homeowners association. We know that in certain circumstances, this subdivision as an example, an HOA is a deterrent to development. The developer really does not feel that the homeowners association is an attractive, marketable attribute to the subdivision, and so we do offer a solution. It would be something that would have to be on the deed. It would run with the land. It will likely cause additional staff time to maintain in the future if it's not done. If the management isn't appropriate, but it's something that I think we're willing to take on in order to accept the subdivision.
Okay, thanks.
Further questions for staff? We did advertise for a public hearing, and we'll hold a public hearing now on item 6A. Is the applicant here, and do you wish to provide any comments? Oh, there you are. Hi. No comments tonight? Thank you. Public comment, please. Anyone wishing to provide public comment? Mary.
Just speaking on my own behalf and listening to the discussion that just occurred, Mary Flowers, P.O. Box 3094, Kalispell. It sure seems to make sense to require a homeowners association, and I understand there's an alternative, but it sure sounds like it's going to be more work for the city to take on, and it would just simplify things for you to make a condition that there be a homeowners association put in place. So I would encourage you to do that.
Thank you, Mary. Further public testimony tonight on this item? Not seeing any. I'll go ahead and close the public hearing and turn it back to council for discussion or a motion. Richard.
I'll make a motion and then have some discussion if we could. And I'll move to approve the preliminary plat for a 14-lot subdivision located at 633 Colorado Avenue, WPP 17-07, subject to findings of fact and 19 conditions.
I'll second.
Seconded by Councilor Sweeney. Richard.
First of all, Christine, thank you very much for coming back. The last time I saw you in this chamber, you wished us all a good morning. And because that planning board meeting, I think it was at 12:08 when you finally had your opportunity to speak, and hopefully we'll get you home a little bit sooner this evening. I've had actually 3 bites now at this apple. First, I was filling in for Frank when it came before the park board. The park board voted unanimously in favor. The same thing happened at the planning board, and this is a little bit different than many of the subdivisions that we've seen in the past. And I think it's taken a great deal of sensitivity, as I understand the project, to maintain view sheds for the neighbors. And overall, I think it also speaks well to our original desire, and we took a firm stand to require that parkland dedication of the earlier subdivision in that one corner of the that subdivision, whose name I can't remember. But this now starts to put those puzzle pieces together, and I think eventually we'll have 4 little corners all joined up and have a wonderful spot for a city park that meets our requirements. So I will vote for it.
Further comments? All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and that motion does carry unanimously. Thanks, Bailey. We'll move on to item 6B, which is consideration of a request from Gordon Tate for a major lakeshore variance to dredge approximately 1.3 acres of the Lazy Bay Channel located at the north end of Whitefish Lake, adjacent to the properties between 647 and 695 Delray Road. Bailey.
Okay, it's me again, sorry. It's hard to get organized when you're back to back like that. First off, I just want to kind of, I'm sure you all are aware, but for the public that's either watching or that will see the video or read the minutes later, this next item is a very tricky situation because the city's jurisdiction, and it's something to bear in mind when I go through everything, is from low water down into the lake, not low water above onto the land. So just to bear that in mind, that it's a very confusing situation, it's a very complicated situation, and just to throw that out there for people listening. So the applicant is requesting a major variance to dredge the bottom of a portion of Lazy Bay Channel when that is located at the northwest end of Whitefish Lake. The major lakeshore variance is required under our lakeshore regulations that states that all dredging permits require a major variance. The applicant is proposing to remove approximately 6,000 cubic yards of material. The removal area is approximately 700 feet long by 100 feet wide and would be excavated, I cannot talk tonight, 4 feet in depth. This area is approximately 1.3 acres in size. The removed materials proposed to be placed outside of the lake and lakeshore protection area on the adjacent island that is located under county jurisdiction. The applicant is in the process of obtaining a floodplain development permit for the placement of the fill material below the 100-year base flood elevation, and that is coming from the Flathead County Planning Office. Sorry, my packet for this was pretty big, so I went back to one staff report. So kind of to go over some highlights of this, figure out where I was going. So previously, the channel was dredged under an approved lakeshore permit in 2001 that was approved from the Flathead County Commissioners. Prior to that, the channel was also dredged in 1991 under an additional approved permit from the Flathead County Commissioners. I have found the 2001 file. I have not found the 1991 file, so I'm not sure. It's not in the 2001, unfortunately. The channel is a man-made channel, and it was created sometime in the early 1970s. Not sure of an exact date, but prior to the creation of the lakeshore regulations. You guys don't usually see a lot of lakeshore major variance permits, so I'm going to go through the criteria, but definitely feel free to ask me questions. So there's a couple standards that they'd be looking at a variance for. One is that dredging for the purpose of increasing the water depth of an area for an artificial harbor or lagoon is not permitted. Dredging for the purpose of removing accumulated silt, which blocks access to a docking area, is only permitted if it's less than 500 square feet. And then dredging for the purpose of dredging the lake bed or lakeshore may have adverse impacts and requires a major variance no matter how much it's removing. So some of the criteria, let's see. And again, I don't want to reiterate, you guys, it's in your packet. But again, it's a man-made channel. It was dredged in 1991 and 2001. The homeowners received approval. The channel, over the years, the channel's entrance has silted in, reducing the navigability of the channel for the approximately 13 homeowners along the water. The current application, as I said, this would be the third time. It would be approximately 4 feet in depth to remove the accumulated material. If the dredging permit is not approved, the entrance to the channel will slowly become less navigable until it is no longer accessible by boat or personal watercraft. While this could be considered a better option for their overall lake, consideration must be given to the to the status of the channel as a non-conforming use and the homeowners that have been using this for 42 years approximately. However, staff, we do have concerns with the reapplication for the dredging every 10 to 15 years. It's one of those catch-22 situations, it feels like. So, there are no alternatives that exist that meet the standard since a variance is required no matter how much material would be needed. The proposed variance has the potential to impact water quality. However, mitigation of the impacts is possible during the project construction by the utilization of a turbidity curtain. And for those of you that don't know, it's a weighted curtain that is erected into the lake at both ends of the project. At the completion of the project, the long-term water quality of the channel could be improved. It would not diminish fish or wildlife habitat, alter the characters of the shoreline, or interfere with navigation. For most of these criteria, the effects of the dredging would actually be a positive impact. They have submitted an environmental impact statement as required by our lakeshore regulations for a major variance, and that stated it did not include any significant impacts to the existing environment. Highlights. As I said, I just don't want to keep repeating myself over and over again. Okay, so we'll get to the meat of it pretty much. So, okay, so staff recommended approval of the application dated December 4th, 2017, subject to 17 conditions in the staff report. 4 of those conditions I did recommend at the Lakeshore Protection Committee, and additionally, I am recommending that you strike condition number 10. And that states that no mechanical equipment can come in contact with the water. However, this requires mechanical equipment, so that was a faulty one on my end there. The Lakeshore Protection Committee did meet on January 10th and considered the request. The applicant's representative presented at the committee meeting, answered questions on the proposal. There were no other members of the public that spoke at that meeting. And I did include those draft minutes as part of your packet. They're on page 180. Following staff presentation, the committee voted unanimously to recommend denial of the application to the planning board and city council. And the committee based their denial on its section A, criteria 3, item A, that the proposed project may materially diminish water quality. So then the packet went to the planning board on January 18th of 2018. And they considered the request. And again, the applicant's representative presented at the planning board, as well as 3 of the surrounding landowners. And additionally, 3 members of the public commented on that proposed item. And the draft minutes are on page 153 of your packet. Between the Lakeshore Committee and the planning board, I did have 10 public comments received prior to the planning board packet going out, and 4 additionally up to the planning board meeting. All of them were in support. Since the planning board meeting, there were 3 additional comments. 2 are included in your packet, and then you received 1 comment that was presented to you that came in today, yesterday, presented to you this evening. So a lot of comments on this. And ultimately, the planning board, as I said, they recommended approval of the application with the 17 conditions, striking condition 10 that I had proposed. I'm happy to answer questions about it. Again, it's kind of a complicated situation.
Thanks, Bailey. Frank, we'll start with you.
Bailey, I'm trying to reconcile something in my brain.
All good.
You said that based on the studies we've had, that it would actually improve and not affect turbidity in the water, correct?
Well, we are requiring samples that they provide samples at their discharge time.
They're going to provide a curtain and that kind of, and that after it's done, water quality could actually improve.
It could.
Won't get any worse. At least that's what the study showed.
Potentially, yeah. That's what their environmental impact study was showing.
How was there a finding from the lakeshore that it was going to diminish water quality?
They felt that the fill material being placed on the county and the difference in, so when you look at the elevation of where the fill material was being placed on the county, which is out of our jurisdiction, just reminding that, according to the topo study, it's 2 feet above our high water elevation. Now, it's not 2 feet in distance, it's 2 feet in elevation.
Correct.
And they had concerns that the berm, and again, the applicant can give more technical dimensions and words on how it would actually be constructed. But basically, they were concerned that it wouldn't stop the sediments from coming into the lake and potentially, if we have a high rain event in April, because they wanted to do the project here, starting in March, like as soon as possible, start working on this. If we get a high rain event in April or May, that wouldn't just wash the material straight back into the lake. That was their concern.
Is there a way to mitigate against that? I assume that is there a way, or do we need to condition this if we want to approve it to require that not happen or that not occur, and that this berm be appropriately covered with vegetation so that it doesn't happen in the future?
Well, they are proposing to vegetate it. So what they were going to do is remove the sod material that is currently out there, put the fill material, put the sod back on top. So the vegetation, what's vegetation that's there would continue to be there and hopefully reestablish before something like that might happen. Again, this gets into the problem of putting conditions on an area of the permit that is outside of our jurisdiction.
Right.
And can we enforce those conditions? That's a great question that I've been talking with Angie about. So if they're not meeting that, are they in out of conformance with their permit? Could we revoke it at that time? That's another condition or another conversation as well. But part of that is our concern with showing, and the conditions that I added, the turbidity samples over the course of the time, not just at the end, but basically providing a discharge proposal to the Public Works Department, to our office, to be able to look at that and monitor the turbidity over time, not just all the way at the end, but every time there is a potential discharge. So we've put conditions in, and I've had numerous conversations with Craig and Neil in the Public Works Department about, how can we do this, and what standards. Talk to Mike Koopel. I can't say his name right. He's gonna hate me for that. But to know what those standards are and what those, what are the parameters of that. So the conditions we've proposed are, I think, what we can do to mitigate any potential water quality impacts from the placement of the fill on the county property. I guess that's kind of what I...
Okay. Further questions for Bailey? Richard.
I understand the problem with the dredging spoils.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering if condition 8 is about as good as we can get on how to stabilize the dredging spoils, particularly if there is a flood event subsequent to August 15th or the following year, when we might have some erosion off of that area. And so I would like to think about this idea of native vegetation, because native vegetation will be a stronger buffer against erosion than will sod, and I'm worried that the sod itself, and to maintain that, will require chemical treatments for its vitality. Do you think that condition 8 sufficiently addresses my concerns, or is this something that I'm going to have to take up with the proponents?
The hard part, so condition 8 is specific to the Lakeshore Protection Zone. Anywhere in town, once you're outside the Lakeshore Protection Zone, I mean, you can use for any fertilizer, you don't have to use native plants. I mean, it's really specific to that 20 feet. The material that's out there, and I know there were pictures in the packet. It is a grassy field area. It's not like green grass sod. So I mean, a lot of the vegetation that's out there probably is a lot of native grasses that are out there. It's not green grass, I guess you could say. It's a field. But again, I mean, a lot of it's specific to that Lakeshore Protection Zone, and they're proposing it outside of that. I mean, it might be as much as we can do.
Okay. One of the other suggestions that I had was at the planning board level was a no wake buoy at the lakeward end of the dredging project, so that people entering or leaving that channel would not create an erosion hazard. And I didn't see any discussion of that, and is that something we can condition? And if so, then I would add that condition.
I don't know if we can condition it. I don't know if we could just encourage them, because Fish, Wildlife, and Parks is who would ultimately approve those or approve the issuance of them. So again, the concern I would have would be if we put a condition on and then Fish, Wildlife, and Parks denies their application or says, no, you can't do it, then does that void their entire permit for this project just because of that condition? That would be my one concern with that project, since I don't know what Fish, Wildlife, and Parks. I know it's been a huge topic along the lake for numerous years and property owners. I don't know what their stand is currently on that.
Okay, has anybody explored that, do you know? You said you hadn't. Wow,
No,
wait,
the last I
I'll ask
remember
the
was when we
proponents.
were looking at City Beach and doing the commercial uses with City Beach and some of that and the concerns with it. That was the last I remembered
swim
talking
areas.
with them. Yeah, in the swim area. And I remember we had a member from Fish, Wildlife, and Parks that came to those meetings. But that's been 2 years ago now, I think. So I don't know I haven't looked into it lately.
All right, and have you also taken a look at condition 17 and compared that with the suggested language from citizens? And do you have a sense one way or the other?
You know, to me, I talked with Angie about it. I mean, it'd be great to know where it's been, since we are going to require it to be inspected and decontaminated. I would assume that the Institute would ask for that type of documentation at that time, or knowledge of where it is. But the one thing I would say is we don't require that of just residential boats that are entering the lake versus commercial. But really, I mean, it doesn't bother me at all. I don't know if the applicant has any
Yeah, I'm just
concerns,
trying to
but-
think back to when the dredges came in to do the river, and we made a catch. And sure enough, those were contaminated vessels, and they had to go through the whole cleansing protocol. And I would hate to, I mean, this is a
It's
piece
our
of
lake,
equipment
yeah.
that goes to places where invasive species, mussels.
I don't see a reason why we couldn't put it on there. It's just more information that we can get. So I'm not against it. It's
Okay.
Just, yeah.
And changing then number 17 to use this a little bit more
It's just a little more.
stringent, more clear wording? Okay.
Yep.
Good, thank you.
Further questions? Just had one question, Bailey. I looked at the cross-section of where the spoils are going to be disposed of. Are they proposing to excavate below existing ground, utilize that material to create a kind of an artificial
I would leave
containment
that
berm?
for the
Or-
applicant
I was a little
to-
confused there.
Yeah, Nathan is here and he was going to talk after me, so I would leave that question for him because
Okay.
he's a better
Is he the
answer.
applicant's representative?
Yes, he
Okay.
is with Territorial Land Works.
With Territorial,
so-
okay.
Mhm,
Thanks,
yeah.
Bailey.
Yeah, no problem.
Then one quick question. So
sure.
I was on the Lakeshore Protection Committee
Yes.
in 2001. I thought we approved the permit.
It went to the county, so it went to the Lakeshore Committee. It was
Okay.
at the time where you had both, so it
Oh,
went
that's
to the
right,
Lakeshore
yeah.
Committee
Ferdo.
and then went to county for final approval.
Right,
Yeah,
okay.
and actually, I had one note I forgot, I made a separate sheet. This is my multiple things, but one of the questions at the planning board was the fill that was dredged out on the previous permits, where it went. There was some confusion at that. So I did look that up. So the staff report in the 2001 permit, the application proposed to load the material into trucks staged outside of the Lakeshore Protection Zone, and the truck would dispose of the material at a gravel pit. And then they had a bunch of silt fence and straw bales and filter fabric to prevent spillage at that time. But, and that's the mayor shaking his head, and I was like, yes, there was no specific condition on the dredge material's final location. The feasibility study that was completed after the permit was approved, so it was approved in June of 2001, and the feasibility study was done in August of 2001, recommended that the material be disposed of on the island, basically in the same location that is being proposed now. And to do the same thing, remove the material, put it down, and do that over. So that's the same. I just wanted that clarified because it was a little confusing before with the permit application versus what actually happened, so.
You know, I think the only hurdle they ran into on that project was the fine clay and colloidal material in the water that was placed into the excavation pit wasn't settling out. So they were returning turbid water back to the lake, which forced them to use some kind of flocculant to settle out the solids. So something to keep in mind.
Yeah.
Anyway, we
So
beat
anyway,
that to death.
I just wanted to make that note because I had promised I'd
Thanks,
look that
Bailey.
into it, so.
One other thing, has any study, has anybody tested those soils to the depth at which they will be removed for septic leachate?
I don't know, Nathan can answer that. I did try to call Mike to ask him what would be the process if something was found when they did that, because I know that was something the planning board talked about, and in Mary's comments as well. And I wasn't able to get a hold of him to find out if he knew, you know, if they find something, does it automatically make it a Superfund site? And now we can't touch anything in the lake at all? But I never got back or heard back from him. So I don't know if they've tested it or what the potential problems, you know, or scenarios that could arise if they did something. Maybe John knows more than I do. So that's something I would have to do some more research into it. But Nathan might be able to know if they've tested anything on it, so. And I'm happy to answer more questions if it comes up. So.
Thanks, Bailey.
Okay.
Thanks.
We did advertise for a public hearing on what is item 6B of our packet. We'll hold that public hearing now. Do you wish to address the council?
Good evening. Nathan Lucky with Territorial Landworks. That's L-U-C-K-E. Thanks a lot for taking the time to consider this request tonight. We are representing Gordon Tate as well as the other homeowners that are in support of this project. First off, thanks a ton to Bailey and the city staff for processing this request. They've been excellent to work with and really appreciate the efforts that they've made on this. So thanks to them. Most simply, we are in support of the staff report with one minor change that I've brought up at the Lakeshore Committee as well as the Planning Board. I'm going to bring up again tonight. And then we're also obviously in support of the Planning Board's recommendation for approval at a 5-to-1 vote. The condition that we would like to see changed is Mike Kupel made a comment about 5 NTUs, which is a measurement of the turbidity of the water. And in that language that he wrote in an email, he also talked about how the average that they've measured out of Lazy Creek is about 3 NTUs. So the number 3 ended up in the staff report for the condition of approval, and we would just like to see it reflect what Mike's recommendation actually was, which was 5 NTUs. Just a couple things from the regulatory standpoint that I'd like to hit on this evening. When you look at the purpose of the Lakeshore regulations, there's 4 purposes that are listed, and section 13-1-2C states that one of the purposes is to conserve and protect the value of lakeshore property. And of course, that's obviously one of the goals of this project, is to maintain the lake access for the boats for these property owners. Dredging is listed as a permitted activity in the regulations. It is not listed as a prohibited activity. Dredging itself, as Bailey hit on, is not actually varying from specific regulatory standards. It's just saying that dredging requires you to go through the major variance process. So again, dredging is not necessarily the variance itself. It's just saying, hey, when you're going to dredge, you need to go through some kind of more rigorous process, and that's the major variance process that I outlined. There's a couple sections within section 13-3-1Q that talks about when you do want to dredge, and one of them is for, hey, we have shallow water and we'd like to make it deeper. And then right below that, the next section talks about if you've had siltation occur in or around your dock, wanting to move that, and there's some standards for that. And then there's the next section talks about if it's silted in kind of out past your dock a little bit. And so just wanted to point out the fact that really what we're trying to do is not take an area that's always been shallow and make it deeper. We're trying to take an area that, yes, was man-made at one point in time, but return it to its depth that it has been for the last 40 so years. The policy criteria that the project needs to be addressed, you will note that the staff report basically identifies positive impacts to most of those criteria. A couple of things that came up during the conversation so far this evening. So what we'd like to do is, we're not going to excavate down. We're not going to dig a big hole. We are going to take the topsoil and push it off to the sides. And so that's what that cross-section was trying to show. So no, we're not going to dig down in the groundwater, or because obviously the groundwater is not going to be that far below the island there. And so we're just going to dig down about a foot, push it off to the sides, and then put the soil in there and let it dewater. And then we have apparatus to dewater that soil and return it back to the lake, just like, John, you said occurred in 2001. One of the concerns that's been continued to be brought up is, hey, is this soil, after it gets placed, is it going to somehow or another go back into the lake? And I'd just like to, perhaps even just from an anecdotal standpoint, point out that the island itself is not currently washing away. And the soil that was placed there in 2001 is the same type of soil that we'll be putting there. And the island, although we haven't gone out and done geotechnical studies, undoubtedly that island is made out of the same type of material that we'll be removing. And again, that island's not being washed away. So the fact that we're now putting more material on that island, to me, hopefully, people can understand that now all of a sudden that soil is not unique and will be washed away in particular. From an elevation standpoint, I have a few comments that I'll point out to you. And I guess I'll just basically keep it pretty simple. So the high water mark as adopted by the city of Whitefish is 3,000.8. So almost a sea level of 3001, a little bit less than that. And where we will be placing the soil is over 2 feet higher than that. In fact, the 100-year floodplain in this area is at 3004. It's actually 3004.23. So by the time we're done with the project, the elevations of the island will basically be at the 100-year floodplain where we're placing the soil. We do want to, after we deposit the soil, take that topsoil vegetation that we will have stripped and put it back on. And I have not heard any stories, and perhaps Gord can address this, of trying to turn it into a green Kentucky bluegrass lawn. Every intent is to keep it, as far as I know, to keep it in the vegetative state that it currently is, which is kind of an upland grasses. Which, although I'm not a vegetation expert, appear to be natural, native type grasses. And then as far as the IAS, is that correct, the acronym? AIS. Thank you, AIS. We should all know that by now. So Dredge America is currently the company that we're speaking to do this work. They do dredge across the United States. They are very aware of this program. Of course, in the Midwest is where a lot of it came from originally, and so they're very used to doing this. They do it as a matter of standard procedures for liability through their insurance company, regardless of what permits may or may not require. So that will be something that they're very familiar with, on top of the conditions that are listed in the permit anyway, so that our local folks make sure that we don't get anything contaminated in Whitefish Lake. I have all kinds of more information, but I will let you ask questions if you have them. Thanks for your time tonight.
Any questions? Your name again, I'm sorry.
Sure, my name's Nathan.
Nathan.
Lucky.
I do have a question. If you could turn to the cross-section retention area cross-section for me, please. This is on page 265 of the packet. So this is the detention cross-section. It's showing a 12 to 18 inch cut into the existing ground or below existing ground. And then you're showing, basically you're cutting and then filling or creating these temporary berms, the purpose being to create capacity for the slurry, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
You note those side slopes at 2 to 1, 5 feet high, so basically, you know, the width of that base of that berm is going to be 20 feet, correct? At a 2 to 1?
Yes, that's correct.
So that's not shown accurately in the drawing, but that's not really my point. I'm just, from your professional perspective, is this going to work? I mean, you're taking raw fill,
right?
You know, at 2 to 1 slopes, 5 feet tall.
Yeah.
Are you compacting the fill? Is it going to become liquefied and breach?
And go away very quickly.
Those are questions I have.
Right.
Without lining it, I just feel you're going to have difficulty containing the slurry because, as you know, it's not soil. It's going to be in situ sediments and water.
Yeah, it's interesting. The 2001 application talked about the water to soil ratio, I think, of about 50-50. And in speaking with Dredge America, that is not accurate. It is mostly water initially. And I think that's exactly why they ran into the issues in 2001. Now, there's the reality of what happened in 2001, and then there's the data that we have today. We did get a soil sample done, and it's actually more of a sand-type material. At least that's what the sample shows, which would settle out more quickly than a clay or a silt-type material. So,
do you envision the depth of water as you're pumping, you're discharging into this detention basin temporarily before it settles, and then it's pumped and treated and discharged back to the lake? What's the depth of the water going to be in the detention pond at any given time?
They want about a 50% freeboard. So
it'll be
2.5 feet.
Okay.
Yeah. So will it work? My understanding last time is that they dug a series of trenches and basically let the material get plopped on the ground, and then because it is a bit of a slurry, kind of went down in these trenches and then proceeded to go back to the lake at a higher turbidity level than they wanted to see. And so John's right, they added a flocculant to slow that down. So best practices have changed, and now they create a berm type situation. We do want to get this built in the summertime so that it can get vegetated and the vegetation can begin to establish, because the work, although yes, we did want to originally do this and as soon as we could, mainly because we thought that's what the permitting agencies would want. It seems like a much better plan to actually do it in September. And so if we can get the berm constructed and compacted and vegetated this summer, then we can start getting some vegetation that'll help hold that in place. And then the weir structure will allow this to pond up, and then things will settle, and then it'll just skim off the surface and let it start to dewater back. And then we actually have 2 turbidity curtains planned. One turbidity curtain right in the channel that, from talking to Dredge America, will actually be all that's really necessary, but recognizing the concerns with the project, we have the second one out at the lake side of the project as well.
I appreciate you addressing that. I'm certainly not questioning the engineering that's gone into this project.
I had the same question.
But I caution that,
yeah.
and I hope that it's monitored carefully
yep.
as the dredge operation proceeds. With that, I don't have any further questions. Richard?
Have you done any soil samples for septic leachate?
We have not, no.
Do you intend
to? No, we don't. Honestly, so I'm a professional engineer, and I do design a lot of septic systems and do a lot with nitrates and phosphorus, and I guess there's probably a lot of people out there that know a lot more technical information than I do on that, but using the information that I do have, I can't envision that concern being real. That effluent from a septic system is somehow going to find its way to that soil and then as it gets removed, create some big environmental concern. I can't put those two items together in my head and make it
Agreed.
function.
Okay.
Thanks for your time.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, appreciate it. We did advertise for a public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak to this project, now is your time, and for the record, your name and address. We do have quite a lengthy agenda ahead of us, so if we could be as efficient with our time as possible, I'd appreciate it.
I will certainly keep that in mind. Thank you, Mayor and Council. My name's Gordon Tate. I'm the applicant, and so I just wanted to number one, thank you for your time and consideration on this application. My family and I have been coming to this area, wonderful area, for 50 plus years, and plan on doing and enjoying this wonderful area for many more to come. Just a couple of items that perhaps are a little bit more sort of non-technical and non-engineering in nature. That silt buildup that's been occurring at the mouth of the channel has actually created some fairly dangerous situations. I personally was involved with a few of them this summer, pushing boats through that channel and watching people get stuck in the channel and leaving their own watercraft to try and maneuver their way through. I'm not the fittest guy in the world, but I do know that that's basically turned into quicksand. It is dangerous. We won't let our dog go off the end of our dock. He wouldn't make it back out. He's a fairly hefty fellow, but and actually this year a buck did get stuck in there and didn't make it out. It's just gotten so deep and so thick. It really is like quicksand. So from a safety concern, there is certainly something to be considered there. When we watch people leaving their boats and trying to push them through, it's kind of created a bit of an issue. Just wanted to reiterate the fact that all the homeowners in the area are completely on side, very, very enthusiastically supporting this project, including Brent Stratton and his wife that are the new owners of the island property. He's very enthusiastic. I think those of you that were maybe at the planning board meeting saw his enthusiasm. He's certainly been very, very helpful in allowing us to use this property for the proper disposal of the silt material. And we do also think that it will end up in a vibrant and healthy channel, which is good for everybody, including the wildlife, as opposed to something that perhaps gets silted in. So I think Nathan reflected on the fact that we are not altering the lake bed, we're not trying to expand the lake shore or anything like that. We're really trying to remove foreign material. And again, I'm not the expert, but I think a lot of this comes down in Swift Creek when heavy runoff is taking place. I know that that's where we seem to see the silt entering the lake, and we're just trying to remove foreign material as opposed to make the lake deeper. So appreciate your consideration. Thank you very much for your service and your leadership. Thanks.
Thanks, Mr. Tate. Do you have a question, Frank?
I do, and maybe for both of you. And it occurred to me earlier, I didn't ask the question. Given that we've done this at least twice since the channel was created, have you guys given any thought to how this might be the last time we have to do this?
We have, and I know Nathan can speak to it from a professional perspective. We've sort of said, look, we think it's sort of an urgent situation right now, but many of us are very much invested in saying, is there a more permanent solution we could look at? I know that the Whitefish Lake Institute suggested that we consider looking at the exit of the channel to see if we could perhaps make that bigger, wondering whether or not that might help in some degree. Mother Nature is certainly depositing silt. We see it arrive when there's big winds. You can just sit there and watch the silt get washed down the lake with storms. So I don't think you can, in some ways, mess with Mother Nature. But we've asked Nathan and his group to consider permanent solutions. I know that when he's spoken with Dredge America, I won't put words in his mouth. I'm sure he can help you with that. He has suggested in conversation with them that they have some ideas about how they would do it that might lead to hopefully a little bit more longer-term solution. But right now, we certainly are interested, once we get this done, to look at maybe more viable long-term solutions, because it's not something we want to be doing on a regular basis either.
And maybe this expresses some ignorance on my part. So what you're saying is that we're getting silting coming down Swift Creek, and we're getting silting occurring by the storms coming, what I'll call south to north, or on the lake,
east to west,
driving some of the silting from the lake itself up into that channel. Is that correct?
I'll leave it to the experts.
Nathan again with Territorial. Yeah, that's our belief, and so far we haven't had any information to indicate otherwise. I think a permanent solution, as much as we'd like to find one, I think it'd be an example of man trying to do something didn't work out so great in the end. So, because the issue is not Lazy Creek, from everything that we can tell, it is the sediment coming out of Swift Creek. So we could build something and it might slow it down, but I don't think it would be a permanent solution. Now, one thing that we can do, and if you compare the 2001 application to today's application, is we are proposing to remove more silt than last time. And some of that is just due to some simple math assumptions being looked at it, but we would like to, you can imagine if you dredge vertically, these edges in water are going to silt back in more quickly. So if we can slope it out, and again, the technology with GPS has become quite amazing what they can do. And so they're going to get in there and actually really map the channel, and then they will dredge based off of the models that they make, so that we can flatten out the slopes as much as possible to really slow down as much as possible the siltation that will unfortunately occur again.
Thank you. Public comment tonight.
I apologize as well. It's probably off of the application, but I'm at 669 Delray Road. I forgot to use my address. Thanks very much.
Rebecca.
Rebecca Norton, 530 Scott Avenue. Kind of speaking as a citizen, but I was the person on the planning board that spoke against it. My main concern is that this area of the lake does have septic leachate in it, and I went on a boat ride a few years ago and heard and did confirm at the planning board that herbicides are used to kill weeds, and the president of the homeowners association said 4 to 5 years ago, but the person I was on the boat with, which I will not disclose, said it's every summer because the weeds get so dense in there that they get in the propellers. And a lot of these, well, some of the houses are rented out all summer long. And so that's another concern, is that the septic systems are approved for a certain number of people in the house, but if they're being exceeded, that they're not actually functioning under the permit that they actually have. I did call the county about it, and I called the DEQ to find out about what can be done. I realize I'm the lone wolf crying here, that it's gone through a number of processes, but my main concern is that we are taking polluted sludge and we're putting it right next to the place where it could easily go into again without cleaning it at all. And so I would think maybe there's a chance we could have a condition that you would actually remove the polluted sludge and take it to an alternative site, just to make sure that if we do have a high water event, we're not recontaminating that area. And then this I don't know, but we do have experts on council, is, the Whitefish River cleanup turned out beautiful, and it had to be dredged, and then we had to put in river rock afterwards, and it is very clean. And so how come we can't have something like that down there, even though it's a man-made channel that was made for the purpose of creating an island? It just seems like those people really are devoted to their properties. They want to have solutions, but this is the third time that we've gone through this, and we know that the sludge is contaminated, and so I don't know. It just seems kind of a shame that we don't take the opportunity to look at big rocks down there or something. But maybe Mayor Mofield will discuss that. Mostly I really want to keep the river, the lake as clean as possible, and I'm uncomfortable with the idea of putting contaminated sludge right next to where it could go right back in. And I also worry a little bit about how we would ever monitor that. All right, thank you.
Thanks, Rebecca. Who's next? Mary.
Good evening, Mary Flowers, Community Unity Consulting, and P.O. Box 3094, Kalispell. I became interested in this project because I had to sit through a planning board meeting where it was discussed, and then I started to read the comments, and you have are very fortunate to have both the Whitefish Lake Institute and your Lakeshore Protection Committee really looking at this. And so what I did was to just try to reiterate some of their comments that I didn't think had been captured into the conditions. And so you should have in front of you my comments with the written suggestions in italics. The first suggestion asks that the applicant shall provide the city prior to the project's beginning documentation that a location has been secured and any necessary permit obtained to ensure that the fill material removed during the dredging will be placed outside the 100-year floodplain associated with the lake, above the potential lake level during a high water year, and outside the Lakeshore Protection Area. The Lakeshore Protection Minutes did note that this island has been underwater historically, and so that caught my attention as well. It seemed like this is a major variance, and you have the opportunity to ensure that this material is placed in an area that's safe. The discussion that was just had about the pond is also a issue, I think, and this was from Mike Copel's comments almost directly. I just kind of cut and pasted what he had said in his comments, that prior to commencement of the project, the applicant shall provide the city with measurements for a proposed settlement pond and documentation demonstrating that the depth of groundwater measurement for the proposed settling pond will provide adequate treatment, and that the potential groundwater intrusion into the pond will not negate the potential treatment. The mention that perhaps a line pond might be a better solution, I didn't include, but from your discussion, I would ask you to continue to vet that idea a little bit and maybe add that to that condition. The next condition I recommended, again, is the wording that came directly from Mike Copel's email, which requires notice of where the dredging equipment has been the last 2 water bodies, and that it's been out of the water for 30 days. Again, apparently that was an earlier project that that had been required on, and Mike recommended it be required again here. And then the next issue recommendation would be a new condition that asks that the applicant shall provide the city prior to commencement of the project the results of testing for potential contamination of the dredge material drawn from representative samples of the area and depth to be dredged. I think this is a benefit. I don't think it's a high-cost item. It's asking that we have this baseline data because it appears clear that this is going to come back to us. We know that this is an area where septic leachate has been an issue in that area. We also don't know where the private well on this island is. I think it would inform the homeowner about the type of material being deposited if it is placed on the island. So I think that's a kind of a low cost that would provide some information to inform future decisions you make. And finally, as I was not familiar with the history of this project, it's my understanding that a channel like this could never be constructed again under our current regulations. But I think because dredging applications do come before you, it would be important just to add a condition saying that the issuance of this variance by the city for this dredging project at this location at this time shall not provide the basis for future or other dredging permits on the Whitefish Lake. They would have to stand on their own. There's not some kind of due process that is afforded by this. And there was one more point I was going to make. What was it? I like the idea of the no-wake buoy. Again, despite the fact you can't require it, I think you could ask them to apply for it and to provide you information. If it's denied, it would again inform your process, and it may very well, they seemed at the hearing not to be opposed to doing something like that. Shoot, I know there's one more thing I wanted to say, and it's not jumping out at me. Again, thank you.
Thanks, Mary. Further public testimony tonight. Leo.
Leo Keene, 514 Pine Place. Sorry to drag this out, but a couple questions, which you can probably answer, John. I'm wondering why this does not require a Section 404 permit from the Army Corps of Engineers?
They've applied to
They
the
have
Missoula
applied?
branch, yes.
And have they received the permit?
I'm not sure, I'm not the applicant. Have you received the permit from the Army Corps? Before the project can commence though, Leo, I think I can address this. They've submitted a joint permit application to the Conservation District, DEQ, Army Corps of Engineers, a floodplain development permit, and the DNRC for a land use license, if I'm not mistaken. So they've covered their bases from a regulatory standpoint.
So all of those need to be in hand before it can be done. Okay, the other question is the island. I'm familiar with this area because I fish for northern pike in that channel. It's very good fishing in the spring. And I don't think there's an island there. We keep talking about an island. There's a peninsula there.
That's what they're referring to.
You're referring to the peninsula.
Oh, the actual island, okay.
I didn't think there was an island there, but the culvert is part of creates an island. Could we see the picture again of where the fill will be placed? It goes on that island, is that right? Or on the peninsula, on the end of the peninsula? Okay.
It's page 260 of the packet, Michelle.
And then also the diagram was good. Haven't seen that one. It appeared to me from the diagram that the channel wasn't being excavated, but the entrance to the channel, is that right? Okay, and then the fill placement is right there, retention area. I think Richard's point about that being reclaimed with natural vegetation is really important and not sod. I think that would be a really important factor in the approval of this, to have that as native vegetation and the permits in place. Thank you.
Thanks, Leo. Further public testimony tonight? Not seeing any, I'll close the public hearing and turn it back to council. Do you want to, well, I'll ask, is there a motion? Discussion?
Oh, I'll go ahead and get
Richard.
a motion started, and then I have some comments and some changes. So I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve the request from Gordon Tate for a major lakeshore variance to dredge approximately 1.31 acres of the Lazy Bay Channel located at the north end of Whitefish Lake, adjacent to the properties between 647 and 695 Delray Road. This will be WLV-17-W37. Is
there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilor Sweeney. Would you like to speak to your motion?
I would.
If you have amendments, let's get those out on the table first.
I think we're actually, if I look at the number of conditions, it's really just now 16, is that correct? Not 17, since there was the removal of number 10? No, that's fine. So I would suggest that we change what is now, well, in our packet, so we can all be looking at the same thing. Condition 16, change that 3 NTU to 5 NTU. That seems to be consistent with the recommendation of the Whitefish Lake Institute. And then I would, and I don't know if this is going to come as an amendment, and that is to insert the language provided by Mike Gopel and the Whitefish Lake Institute and and Mary Flowers from Community Consulting on number 17, which would actually be number 16, but to use that language and insert that in its place. And I would also, while I can't, because it's in the county, I can't require or set a condition for native vegetation. Oh, sorry, Bailey, yes.
I was going to say, I was sitting there thinking, so the county floodplain permit has not been issued yet because they cannot issue the floodplain permit until all the other permits have been approved. But they do have a legal notice and a public comment period as part of a floodplain permit. And some of it I was thinking was, even if we can't do them as a condition, maybe we, and I know I'm making more work for myself, but draft up a letter of things that we would like to see as conditions on their floodplain permit, which could impact the settling, the pond itself, the placement of the material, that would be looked at by the DNRC engineer, Mark Pittman, who reviews all the floodplain permits. So that might be an option as well. If we can't add the conditions onto our permit, is that we provide a comment to the county for their permit.
I think that sounds like a marvelous
idea. More work for myself.
But I would also like the record, even though I can't condition it, to indicate that this is a one-time permit for this project, and really should not be considered as a standard for anybody that wants to have a little more dredging to make a little better boat access.
I think to that point, Richard, I actually appreciated Mary's suggested addition. It's on page 2 of her memo.
Which one's that?
The issuance of this variance by the city for this dredging project at this location at this time shall not provide a basis for any future or other dredging permits in or near Whitefish Lake, because I think it allows us to evaluate each project on its merits.
Right, but do you think we should put that in as a condition, or?
It would be my suggestion. I mean,
Okay.
when we dredged it, Bay Point, I mean, it was based on other criteria that we developed as part of the findings of fact, and I think this language gets to that issue.
That will be an additional condition. Do you want me to do that in my motion, or do you want me to do that as a friendly amendment?
Let's do it as a friendly amendment, and it would be condition number 18 if the council would like to consider it.
It'll be 17 because we lost number 10.
Right.
Okay. So that's my motion. I was afraid of that. Yes. First of all, the motion was to approve, but with the change and insertion of language provided by Whitefish Lake Institute in condition.
What will be now 15, right?
Which will now be 15. No. Which will now be number 16.
It would be 17.
Well, the 5 NTU.
Oh, 5 NTU.
Is condition 15.
Is condition 15. Condition 16 is the language that we were provided. And that's the extent until I come back with a friendly.
Let me go through this real quickly.
Sure.
So your friendly amendment modifies condition number 15 to change 3 NTUs to 5 NTUs. You've amended condition number 16, and you've added Mary's language regarding the dredge operator providing documentation to the city of Whitefish where the equipment had been previously used, correct? And then we've added condition number 17 from Mary regarding the issuance of the variance shall not provide a basis for any future or other dredging permits in or near Whitefish Lake.
That is correct. If you want to do that all at once, that's
And
fine.
I would take that as a friendly amendment. I'll just need a second to that
Yeah.
effect.
Second.
Seconded by Counselor Sweeney. Bailey?
So Nathan would like to discuss the amendment, it would be to condition 16, about the AIS. He has because he just saw Mary's comment, so he would like to address that, if that is okay.
Sure.
Thank you for the opportunity. I apologize, I did not see these until just now, actually. If the condition that's being considered is just for disclosure of the last two water bodies, I'm fine. If it's all of the text that's in bold italics there, I think that is difficult to guarantee because I don't know enough about Dredge America, whether they're going to quarantine a piece of equipment for 30
Well,
days.
that's exactly right. I think it's a little bit too restrictive. I mean, if you're a company owner with a barge, are you going to let it sit in dry dock for 30 days, or are you trying to use it for more business? I think a level 2 inspection by the Institute would be more than sufficient, or adequately sufficient, I should say.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be fine with FWP and the or the Whitefish Lake Institute, you know, some kind of belt and suspenders approach, but paying for a piece of equipment to sit in dry dock would be
So we'd
onerous.
strike and shall document that the equipment to be used has been out of the water for 30 days prior to project schedule. And
Subject to a level 2 AIS inspection.
or just an AIS inspection. You can scrap the level 2.
Performed by, do we have to say it's going to be?
It's already being performed by WLI
Okay.
as part of the condition. Is that okay with the second?
The second's okay with that.
Okay, is everyone clear with the friendly amendment? Because we'll vote on that first. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign. The friendly amendment carries unanimously, which brings us back to the original motion for approval. Further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and that carries unanimously as well. Michelle, thank you. And we will adjourn till 9:45. We need a quick break.
Leo?
Make sure that it's stuck to cancel my first meeting.
Oh, I know, because it's, well, and it's weird because they have the mayor sign instead of Adam, but it doesn't actually matter.
I sign and you sign.
You get, yeah, you get a pass somehow.
It's at 10. 10 on Wednesday?
You have these recorded lectures that are 4 hours long, and you know so much of it is little tangents that these professors go on. So you just like speed it up a little bit, and then because you're following along and filling in the blanks. But yeah, I can imagine doing like a podcast. I feel like I'd be missing too much.
Does it raise the pitch? It's fine.
Yep.
You know,
It's
it's
like,
just,
oh,
it's just a signature, so it's all good.
Yeah, it goes
I
faster.
think that's just fine. It's so hard because you get those loud people, those people that speak really loud into it, and then you get the next person that's really quiet, and it's like,
And I try and ride those levels.
yeah,
I'm getting a really good signal, so
good.
hear what you're hearing.
That's fine. As long as you can do it. Bill doesn't.
Yeah, hey, we did a quick debrief. And it
Bill
sounds
doesn't
like
listen because his mic is straight up his face, so he's over there playing on his phone.
It was only smooth because we were prepared. That's all I gotta say is you sure. No, I gave you a lifesaver for a change. Doesn't work like that.
Are you starting to
And
get?
two dum-dums.
Are you starting to get a cold? Are you starting to get a cold? Oh, you're at the tail end. It sounds like you're just getting it.
There is a.
Okay, make these next ones simple.
So why don't I ever see you in the police? Driving a jet ski into. Hey, I want you to know, people just filled in for you here. They did not fall asleep.
My mother always said that.
No, you're just checking your eye for leaks. I'll tell you, you get John and I force that, and the 200-foot no more. We got.
I really want
You already looked into
vodka.
it. You're already waiting to hear from MDOT on this for the golf course.
Yeah, and I'll bring that up real quick at the end.
Bring it up in council comments.
The problem is, and you can sound really smart about this, I asked them to do it, and they said, well, we need to request a speed study. So I requested a speed study, and they wrote back and said, okay, we estimate that'll take about 3 years.
I'll send you
That
video.
was a little less than a year ago, so we're about a third of the way there.
I remember you.
How was the 911 funding? Was it?
It was really good.
Basically what we talked about. Did they provide?
We're still trying to, there's a discrepancy of about 9,000.
9,000 what?
So what they have for the waste is actually have a flaw to their system. They're meeting up with. The idea being.
That'll be hard for the county because everything, taxes are all based on an assessment.
That's
Which is
what
a
they're- but
state
that-
statute, which, I mean,
But that's what they're moving forward on. I'm trying to look up how they can correlate the two.
they want to move it forward with addresses versus. It's interesting. It will be difficult because I don't know how you collect on an address of an apartment.
That's, they just want to.
If anything, you assess the property owner more if it's an apartment complex.
Well, but her two things, they had paid applicants, so it's good to let them go first. But it is kind of like. I think it's good to do this, city-initiated stuff at the end, so we're not making anyone.
We're going to go ahead and get started, folks. Waiting for you, Deputy. We'll resume with item 6C, which will be ordinance 18-6, amending zoning regulations in Title 11 regarding short-term rentals and amending the definition for residential short-term rental. Wendy.
Okay, good evening. So just a little bit of background information. In 2013, the city developed short-term rental standards and a definition for short-term rental because we didn't have any performance standards, and we were starting to see an increase in this type of accommodation. The standards were developed in order to mitigate the impacts of adjacent long-term residents and provide tools to aid in the enforcement of the illegal short-term rentals. There was no change to the districts that they were permitted in. It's WRR1, RR2, WRB1, WRB2, the big mountain zones, because at that time we still had the big mountain zones, WB2 and WB3 commercial zones. Outside of these districts, short-term rentals are non-compliant. In the 5 years since the adoption of these performance standards, the rental landscape has changed considerably, and city staff at the direction of the council is updating several aspects of these standards, including an updated fee schedule, which I think you're going to hear about next, process for permitting, enforcement, and updated regulations that reflect the actual process that we're reviewing these particular standards. So we're proposing two different amendments within the context here, and which is an updated short-term rental review, and we're also updating the definition that will include the rental of a room within a home if it's for compensation and rented for less than 30 days. So no new areas are being added as part of this short-term rental amendment. It still is the same as it always has been. So just kind of a summary of some of the different changes. Right now, we're going to require a short-term rental permit for all short-term rental units. Previously, if there was like a property manager, they would fill one out and it would comply for all of their units. We're also going to have a joint short-term rental permit and business license. So instead of having to fill out two forms, you just fill out one form and one for each unit that's being rented out. In the past, for the fire marshal, he's been called to do inspections before the application's been submitted to our office, so we weren't verifying that he was going to locations where it might be zoned for it. So now we're going to schedule those once we get an application, because he wants to set his own scheduling as well. The Flathead County Health Department won't issue their tourist home permit until the city's approved the permit, so we've been coordinating with them. They're updating their forms, and we're gonna have a little zoning sign off as well. So we're going to have them submit a copy of their application that they've submitted to the Flathead County Health Department. And again, the new definition will now include the rental of a room within a home for less than 30 days. Previously, the definition required the entire dwelling unit to be rented to be considered a short-term rental. We've also updated some other language rearrangement just to clarify how we're processing these types of permits. So the planning board held a public hearing on January 18th, and following the hearing, the planning board did recommend approval 5-1. At the suggestion of a member of the public, the planning board also added a couple of additional performance standards, including providing verification that the property is appropriately registered and meets requirements for state bed tax purposes, and that the short-term rental be owned by a natural person. We're comfortable with adding performance standard number 12, the proof of the state of Montana registration. In visiting with staff at the city of Kalispell, they simply obtained some sort of a certificate that's issued by the state of Montana as part of their complete application. So this is a simple item for us to request and not a big deal. We're uncomfortable with condition number 13, requiring a short-term rental to be issued only to a natural person. As was brought up at the planning board, there's many reasons why someone may not want to place property in their personal names, such as protecting themselves from personal liability, estate planning, joint ownership, or other tax purposes. And also, having it owned by a natural person doesn't guarantee more or better compliance with the performance standard. The performance standards apply to all, including all the different requirements, local contacts for an emergency, or issuance of a complaint, or paying any sort of taxes regardless of the ownership pattern. There was a suggestion that some of the communities across the country are requiring this, that it be owned by a natural person. In reviewing some of those communities, it looks like they are permitting short-term rentals throughout their entire jurisdiction, where they don't have resort residential zoning designations like we do. And I think the intent of a lot of these is if someone has a mortgage on their home and they want to rent it out for a few weeks, it helps them pay for their particular mortgage. So again, our situation is a little different because we have resort residential designations. So we just wouldn't recommend that the council adopt this particular standard. If this is still something that you'd like us to pursue, we again would respectfully request that you strike this performance standard number 13 and then direct us to do a little bit more research and bring it back under a separate text amendment, so we can have some time to really research it and figure out what's the best way to approach it. And I think it'll be important to identify what's the problem we're trying to solve if you think this is an important standard. So I think if we know what the problem is, then I think we can help address it in a better way. We did receive one public comment that is in your packet. She identified concerns with this particular requirement as well. I guess hopefully you've had a chance to look through Exhibit A, which was the Planning Board recommendation. Again, we're just sort of changing the language around a little bit just to make it a little more clear how we're actually processing the permits. And then we added, of course, 12 and 13 at the recommendation of the Planning Board. You did receive a letter just this morning from Mary Flowers. I thought maybe I could address some of those 5 points that she brought up. She pointed out, had some concerns with allowing short-term rentals in the WB2. And again, this text amendment's not changing that. Short-term rentals has been a permitted use in the WB2. Under permitted uses, it says hotels, motels, or other hospitality and entertainment uses. So a short-term rental is another hospitality type of use. She had some questions about the short-term rental map, and I think that you folks have looked at that in the past. It's on our city webpage. It's all the areas in pink, and we intentionally didn't include the WB2 because residential is not a permitted use in the WB2 unless they come to you for a PUD. And a lot of folks are using that particular map as, oh, I want to buy a property that's short-term rental, where can I find one? So we've had, Matt just updated those maps, and so you have to acknowledge that the WB2, there's a little note there that says the WB2, you can do it in there, but there's only certain areas. You have to have a residential type use. You have to go through a PUD process. So we want them to come to us and talk to us about short-term rentals. We did count how many houses are out there in the WB2, and there's about less than 10 that could come in and get a short-term rental permit. So we didn't want this big, huge pink area showing that you could do short-term rentals if there really is only 10 homes where you can actually do it. There are some areas, of course, that have residential out there, Whitefish Crossing, the Views, some other areas like that, but they were applied for projects to be residential, so short-term rental wouldn't be a permitted use, and would not, because they applied to be housing. They said, we're here to do a housing project, not a short-term rental project. The Views, when they came in 2005, they stipulated on the record that they would not be doing short-term rentals. So I think as projects progress and happen out in the WB2, those are types of conditions that we could certainly be applying to particular projects. She suggested that the definition include kind of a little paragraph after, because the definition is a dwelling unit and then a space within a dwelling unit, and she added with or without independent sanitary and cooking facilities. I mean, that's fine if we want to do that, if you think it helps clarify it. Again, a dwelling unit is defined as having cooking facilities, but we say a dwelling unit or any space within a dwelling unit. So, if you think that this is more clarifying, that's fine. I don't have any objection to that. She also suggested deleting under performance standard number 8, that if the owner is not a full-time resident, and I think that's fine too. We're going to be getting a local contact person, whether they are or not a full-time resident, and it's just simply an emergency contact, or if there's something, a complaint. So I think that's fine to delete that if you want to. We're going to get that information regardless. We just want to make sure that it's really apparent that if you're not living here, but you own one of these units, that we have a local contact. And then finally, she suggested that we require vacation rentals to clearly display their business license number for short-term rentals on any sort of web pages where someone might be advertising for a short-term rental. And we're in the process of looking at some sort of a software that's STR compliance, is that? STR Helper, that's going to help us identify folks who are compliant or non-compliant with short-term rental. So I don't know if it's really necessary. I think this new software that we're going to get is going to take care of this matter, and I just don't think this is probably necessary. So can I answer any questions for you?
Thanks, Wendy. Any questions, Frank?
Yeah, a couple things, Wendy. Is the issue of natural person some kind of a, was the thought that it be, you don't want too many, what I'll call short-term rentals owned by one individual or entity, so that they essentially become a condo association or a series of short-term rentals? Was that the issue that we're trying to address?
Yeah.
Okay, I think there's a way to deal with that, but I think we should deal with that in terms of limiting the number of short-term rentals that can be owned by one or beneficially owned by one entity. We ought to talk about that, Angie, and see if we can come up with a good way to do that.
Yeah, Frank and Wendy and I actually talked a little about that. That I understand the concern of corporations owning tons of short-term rentals, but I think there's ways that other states have dealt with it. Seattle, has an ordinance, and I think if we kind of define the problem, maybe we can find a better way to solve it than just limiting it to natural persons. I mean,
No, I quite frankly, I think you can't do that. But we
Yeah.
have to deal with, because if the issue really is about a collective of a number of these owned by one individual or entity, that's what we address. And there's a way to do that, I hope. And so I think that's something we ought to do before we enact this. The other thing I got a question on is, even if you had a full-time resident that's owning a piece of property, that doesn't obviate the need to have somebody who would be the contact person for purposes of managing the problems that might be created there, because the likelihood is, if they're leasing it out, even if they're a full-time resident, they're probably not around here. And I know a number of people that do just that. They rent their houses out when they're not here. So having their name and contact information in terms of a problem that's been created at their VRBO, that doesn't help us any. So I think we got to get that addressed
Right,
somehow.
and that's one of the requirements, is that they submit an
good.
emergency. That's number 9.
Regardless of who owns it or whether it is a full-time resident.
Yeah, I
involved.
think that's fine too.
Okay, thanks.
Further questions for Wendy?
Yeah, if someone's operating outside the pink areas, is there any way for them to operate legally?
No.
No?
They could be a bed and breakfast, but they'd have to get a permit, like a conditional use permit for a bed and breakfast or a hostel. Those are the only 2 other types of uses. Oh, a boarding house. Or month to month, yeah. It's the less than 30 days
Okay.
that's the issue, so.
Another question I had was, do we know what the total upfront cost is yet? If someone is in the pink and they want to, because that's the question I get a lot, is people say, how much money is this gonna cost me? If I wanna do a short-term rental, I think I'm in the right zone.
As far as like their business license?
Yeah, business
or-
license, and then they start asking questions about the bed tax, and
That's
I've had
state of
people just kind of
Montana,
throw their
so-
hands up
But I
and
think
say,
Dana knows some of that information.
We'll be touching on some of that here very shortly with your next resolution, because we're proposing updating those fees.
Okay.
Anything else? Thanks, Wendy. We did advertise for a public hearing, and we'll hold that hearing now on what will be ordinance 18-6. Dylan?
Good evening. My name is Dylan Boyle. I'm the Executive Director of the Whitefish Convention and Visitors Bureau, and I'm here tonight to voice my support for the addition of the Performance Standard Number 12 in the short-term rental regulations. As Wendy mentioned, the Planning Board did recommend approval of this addition, and on page 273 of your packet also indicates that city staff is recommending approval of this as well.
I just want to touch base on this. The state law does require that accommodations that are rented for less than 30 consecutive days collect and submit a 7% bed tax to the Montana Department of Revenue. And the way that's broken up, there's essentially two pots of money. 4% of that is earmarked for tourism promotion. 3% of that goes to the general fund. So that's kind of how the breakout of that works. Obviously, compliance with bed tax collections within the city limits of Whitefish is particularly of interest to my organization, as we are the official destination marketing organization for the city of Whitefish. And thus, we are designated as the beneficiary of the organization that receives a portion of that 4% of the bed tax back to our organization on a yearly basis. And we utilize those funds to promote Whitefish as a unique and authentic travel destination to those outside of the state of Montana. As you probably have seen in your packet, the performance standard number 12 basically just states that we need to have some type of verification that the property is appropriately registered and meets requirements for the state bed tax purpose. Seems like a pretty simple fix, but ideally for us, what we can do, since we do receive a portion of the bed taxes, more bed tax collections means that we're able to actually utilize potentially more funds if there are businesses out there that are not currently collecting bed tax on their short-term rentals. We could then utilize those funds, obviously, and reinvest those into the economy of Whitefish, which we do with our marketing efforts and public relations efforts in order to ideally drive more shoulder season visitations so we can keep our unique and charming town economically viable for 12 months of the year. Lastly, I just want to thank city staff and the short-term rental committee for all your hard work on this. This is a very nuanced issue that we've certainly grappled with, and I know the Montana tourism industry has as well for a long time. I was invited to come to one of the meetings, and my head was definitely spinning at the end of it, so thank you.
Thanks, Dylan. Who's next? Mary.
And Mary Flowers again. Wendy walked you through some of my comments. I just want to make some, reiterate some points a little stronger. The issue of the WB2, I think, is one that you could simply clean up tonight. The only place that reference is made to the WB2 zoning is in the intro to the section 11.3-35. Where it references that that is a zone that allows short-term rentals. But as Wendy walked you through, in that zoning district, there aren't residential uses allowed except for a caretaker's house or an accessory unit. My concern, and in spending a fair amount of time reading through, I've walked through the county process on this and Kalispell's process and now your process on short-term rentals. And I can tell you in just that short year period, there has been a lot of change. So when you go back online and look at the regulations and the concerns, apartments are becoming a big concern where they're being reframed as short-term rentals taken off the long-term rental market. And the strategic housing plan that you adopted specifically sets the goal of no loss of housing and certainly no more additional short-term rentals out, and even trying to put in policies that will convert some of these short-term rentals into long-term rentals. So tonight you could simply remove any future problem. You don't have a problem right now, apparently from what Wendy said. But what you don't want to do is open the door to inviting applications in a district where it says you can have short-term rentals. So I would encourage you simply to remove that, those WB2 from that introduction in your standards. And then it would just clarify that this is a district that is not going to allow short-term rentals. It really addresses the issue of long-term of the multifamily housing going into this area and being converted through, and I put some links to articles in here, but there's some pretty complex financial instruments that people are using to invest in turning these apartments into short-term rentals. And I think it's just time to get ahead of this while you have the opportunity. It's a simple change to the ordinance before you tonight, and I don't think very significant because, as Wendy pointed out, you don't have any uses right now, you only have 10 houses and you have a number of apartments which were apparently, her interpretation is through the application, they're residential. I think it's a big enough concern that I spent a long time researching it and really encouraging you to remove that zone from this ordinance. The other issues are kind of more minor. I thought in number 2 on my comments, since you are including rooms, that it be clear that your intent is not to say that spaces that don't have cooking facilities can be rented short-term. And so by adding that little phrase, with or without independent sanitary and cooking facilities, just equalizes that and it covers those rooms that you're trying to also add to your short-term rental. I recognize that the issue of a natural person is probably not the right solution, but again, in spending a good bit of time looking at regulations in the West that are being adopted, many communities are seeing this as a real issue. And Frank, as you stated, I think there's a way to solve this. I just don't want the council to dally on it. I think passing this tonight is appropriate. It's in keeping with your strategic housing plan to make some immediate changes, but I'd like to see with no longer than within the year to come back and really address that issue more comprehensively. The issue of the full-time resident, I think just cleaning up that language, it doesn't, that last phrase can just be dropped. And then again, from the reading that I have done on short-term rentals, I'm seeing increasingly, and particularly in counties like Flathead, where you have 3, right now you have the county monitoring, you have Kalispell monitoring, and now you're going to have a monitoring system. In the literature that I was reading, I kept seeing repeatedly that it's helpful to have that license number on the advertisement. It also, and I didn't say this in my comment, but in thinking about it, I think it is really a way of informing the public that this is a unit that has gone through inspection. It's gone through your fire, it's gone through your safety, it's paying bed tax. It's a viable business that you recognize in your community. And so that also informs the public. You may find once you get this software in place that it also helps you network with other communities. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary. Further public testimony, Rhonda.
Hello again, Rhonda Fitzgerald, 412 Lepfer Ave. So I would like to congratulate the staff on a job well done. This is a very important thing to adopt because we have a rapidly changing landscape out there with short-term rentals. Who could have thought as few as 2 or 3 years ago that we would have, I think, over 400 of them in Whitefish, most of them unlicensed. And this is something we really have to grapple with because it has become a problem all across the world, hollowing out neighborhoods and really creating huge problems. So I think this is a great ordinance. I think the addition of requiring registration with the state to collect bed taxes only fair. All of us in the lodging industry do it, and new people coming into the lodging industry, because this is, after all, a business that people are engaged in, it should be a level playing field for everyone. So item 12 is great. And as far as the natural person thing goes, that was just one approach to how to solve the problem of corporations buying up many, many rentals and operating them as a kind of illegal hotel in zones where a hotel would not be allowed. So for instance, you have a resort residential, not resort commercial, which allows a hotel, but in resort residential, you could have somebody buy multiple units and operate them as one entity, and you would basically have a hotel in what is zoned as resort residential. So I'm not sure what the solution is, and I think it's quite complex. Many communities have a regulation. They're all different, but they're all trying to grapple with this because it's morphing in front of our eyes. So I hope that you will adopt this ordinance tonight and have the staff go back and work on the solution to prevent that kind of thing from happening in our community, because I don't think anybody intends for it. Doing business requires some investment. Everyone pays for those costs of doing business, and I think it's only appropriate that people who want to enter the lodging business should have to shoulder the same expenses that everyone else in the lodging business does. And I just, in conversation today with someone, I said, you know, the sharing economy sounds so warm and fuzzy, but reality is that this is big business. And Airbnb, that stands for airbed and breakfast. The two guys who started it were renting an air mattress in their living room. And that was then, and now it's corporations buying homes and apartments and running illicit hotels. So hopefully we can get our arms around it and continue to have a nice, healthy supply of short-term rentals in the zones where they're permitted, and have a strong enough ordinance that people aren't coloring outside the lines. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Rhonda. Further public comments on this item? Go ahead and close the public hearing and turn it back to council for a motion. Frank?
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Angie, is the, I'll call it the natural person issue, is that something we can solve in the near term? Is that something we can come up with a solution set on in the next 2 weeks, 3 weeks?
I don't know about the next 2 or 3 weeks. I think we could definitely do in the next 2 or 3 months.
Okay.
Come back to council with some alternatives. I mean, Rhonda she was completely right. Every community's addressing it differently. It's just finding a way that's best for ours.
Right. I want to go forward on this. My question to, I guess, to the collective, Adam, everybody, we want to get this in, if we want to get this enacted, sooner is better than later. If we enact it tonight, I don't think we can leave this natural person section in there. In other words, 13's got to drop out. We've got to address it somehow. Do we want to adopt it that way, without that reference?
I'd suggest we adopt it without that reference, and then, like Wendy said, you direct staff to come back with some alternatives. I get where that condition's coming from. I get what it's trying to solve. I just think maybe there's a better way to do it. So I think we should adopt it without that condition, and then we can come back to you, maybe even in a work session with some solutions. It's not going to be a cut and dry, this is going to work sort of thing. I think we're going to have to explore a different, couple different alternatives.
Okay, thank you.
Motion.
Do you want to do it?
Richard?
I don't know, I seem to have been
like I said,
motioning right along this evening, so why not? I'll move to approve ordinance 18-06, an ordinance amending the zoning regulations in Title 11 regarding short-term rentals and amending the definition for residential short-term rental in 1-92 and eliminate condition 13.
Thank you, Richard. Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Would you like to speak to your motion?
I would like to speak to the motion. I do want us to come back with a future text amendment to deal with the issue in the now deleted condition 13, and I'm going to also offer a friendly amendment.
We'll take the friendly amendment.
I am persuaded that the, see if I can find it again, suggestion that Mary made in item number 5 in her note to us, her memo to us, all advertising for the vacation rental unit will clearly display the license number for a short-term rental and business license acquired when securing the required license for a short-term rental from the city of Whitefish. I think that that does have some cachet that it would give a person who's surfing the web looking for a place in Whitefish that They have met all the licensing requirements, and it's a legitimate, I think it adds legitimacy because you never know for sure what you're going to get. And this just helps with that.
I'll take that as a motion. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second.
So that would be a friendly amendment. It has been seconded. And that would be condition number, someone help me
That would be
there.
13.
Condition number 13. We'll vote on the amendment first. All those in favor of the friendly, excuse me, Angie, Adam.
I do have concerns on that, because how are we gonna enforce that? So we're gonna have to continually go and monitor every advertisement to ensure that they have that on there. And that's gonna take just a ton of staff time. The STR helper, the company we're gonna be contracting with, they're gonna keep tabs on everything, and we're gonna keep tabs on them, and we're gonna know every single one in these zones, and they're all gonna be licensed. But to require that they advertise in a particular way, this company does not offer that as part of their services. So we're gonna have to go out there and ensure that it's up there. It doesn't help us from a compliance standpoint as far as registering as a business and everything else. All it means is now we have to go monitor their advertising. I think it's gonna be just an extreme burden on staff, I really do.
Appreciate the input. Sorry I didn't recognize you earlier, Adam. Would you like to withdraw your friendly amendments based on our city manager's recommendation?
I think I would.
That's okay with this? It's okay with the second?
I can live with that.
Wow.
Thanks, Adam.
Yeah,
One more thing
I didn't see the semaphore back and forth there.
You know, one thing I do want to point out is the amendments that have come forward thus far are really only to help staff with the compliance efforts that we're trying to do. Staff, I know Mary and Rhonda and others on the Housing Steering Committee recognize that there's more efforts that need to be done, like with the natural person and things of that nature. And maybe even on an ongoing basis as the short-term rental community continues to morph and do things that we didn't anticipate. We're gonna continue to have to come back and address these kind of things. The things we were kind of looking at from a staff standpoint, and that's why there's a few more changes than we initially had thought. You know, and I know Dylan can attest, because you come in there, well, what about this, and pretty soon we're just spinning like mad. But we wanted to get to the point where we could get a few things out there that would work with compliance, with the compliance efforts that we need, in such a time that we can get them out on our newsletter, which is coming out in a couple of weeks, so that we can set a date for compliance, so that we could begin compliance, so that we can be fully in the swing of things before the summer season hits. So that's why we kind of pushed to get a few things in just for the compliance efforts, knowing full well that there's other things that we're going to have to address. And this could be one of them. I mean, one of the things that, you know, I can ask them is, hey, is there a way of, you know, having, you know, have you heard of other communities putting the business license out there? And if it's something they can do, then maybe we can consider it. I'm just concerned at this time that's not anything they offer, and I just can't put that burden on my staff. But that being said, this company, though, has been listening to its client base, and so when there's something that comes up, they go and draft and create new software to handle new things. So as they continue to morph along with what we need to do, I think we'll be able to make some good changes in the future to be able to address some of these things.
Great, thanks, Adam. Angie, do you have a comment?
I do, and I just want to make sure that the record is clear. It's not condition number 13, it's performance standard number 13. I don't know if it makes a difference or not, but I would feel better about it if we clarified that.
I think I withdrew the friendly amendment for performance standard number 13 anyway.
Good point, though.
So, but thank you. That's a double whammy there. Thank you.
Dana.
I just want to let you guys know, as with all business licenses, these are required to be displayed. So, you know, when people do rent, they should be able to see a business license that is displayed for them. So that can be checked when our fire marshal goes through and does his reviews too.
Okay. Thanks, Dana. Further comments on the motion? Frank.
This is a question for you, Angie, and for you, John. How is best for me to create a deadline, if you want, an acceptable one that we can manage, for addressing this issue of multiple ownerships, natural persons, whatever we want to talk about? How do I make that a priority, that it in fact happens, or that we put a deadline on it? How do I do that, John? What's the best way for us to manage that?
Adam, do you have any thoughts on that? We haven't really discussed how issues would be conveyed to the steering committee from the council yet.
Right.
No, and some of the heartburn, I mean, even with the steering committee who brings this kind of stuff up, it's not, it's kind of outside the purview of the task force and of course then the steering committee to implement the short-term rentals, but at the same time, we're all involved in this and we wanna see it happen sooner rather than later. I think the hard part is I don't know what we're gonna get into once we start looking. And so I hate to say that we'll have something ready by a particular date. But my feeling is I would agree with 2 to 3 months that you're gonna see something from staff come back.
And I'd almost want to set it for even a short work session. I mean, just some of the research I've done about how different communities are handling it, there's
Okay.
options out there.
So this is a bigger problem than even I think. Okay. So,
Frank, Seattle took 2 years to pass their ordinance. I'm not saying that will take
no,
that long.
but this is the one issue that I'm concerned about, that I think we've got a gap on, and that I want to make sure that I'm happy to pass this. I don't want to have this, happy to pass this, and, oh, by the way, we'll get to that later. I know we're all busy, and that's why I want to say, okay, I want to do this at a certain, how do I make that happen? What's my best option to make it clear and have consensus that should happen? Request that we set this for an agenda item? Is that what I do?
I'd even request that we set it for a work session, and so we
Okay.
know what we're bringing. I mean, there's so many different options that when we go to council, we know what we're bringing to council.
Okay, so you would like me to make a request for that during councilor comments?
At the end of the meeting. That would be great, Frank.
do that.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks
you.
for bringing that up. All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and that carries unanimously. Which brings us on to Resolution 18-7, approving changes to the business license fee structure and an increase in business license fees and short-term rental application fee. Adam?
All right. Can I borrow your computer? Technical difficulties, sorry. All right, so we went through and part of this process was to review short-term rentals and what we would like them to pay on for licensing and various things like that, but it also came to realize that we hadn't touched our business license fees since 1983. And so that was another thing that we grappled with in trying to bring everything up to kind of where we thought things would be. And so in doing so, we kind of looked around at other communities, what they were charging. We did a little look at, the time that, it takes staff to get out and handle all this kind of thing. And I know that our fire marshal gets out there and inspects each and every one of the businesses. So we looked at that a little bit. And in the end, we came up with the numbers that we came up with, as you see there on the screen. One of the differences that we changed is it used to go from 2,000 square feet to 9,999 square feet. So it was a really large segment there. We divided that into two and then kind of split it up that way. You can kind of see where the prices have gone. And if you kind of look at a year-by-year equivalent, it kind of works out to be about a 2.5% equivalent over time. Initially, we were kind of talking about possibly getting up to 250 on the highest portion. But then when we kind of redid staff time and things of that nature, we brought it back down, and essentially I don't really want to charge more than we need to get the job done. And so that's where we came up with these numbers. One of the things that I personally like to do, and this is kind of just budgetary philosophy and things, is I'd rather much smaller increments more periodically rather than waiting since 1983 before we address some of these things. So, smaller increments on a more regular basis. So this is what we're recommending, and then I suppose in a couple of years, maybe you'll see a couple dollar increase or something like that, but we're gonna try to keep them smaller.
Thanks, Adam. Any questions for Adam on the fee schedule? Brian?
I do. Adam, so the question I've got a lot is, so the reason that we're increasing these is to compensate for staff time and fire marshal. Because a lot of people have said to me, if we haven't raised them since 1983, it's not broke, why fix it?
Well, this business license are being subsidized by another area of the planning department, is essentially what's happening.
Okay.
And so in order to keep kind of fees in line with what they should be, this takes care of that.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions for Adam? Not seeing any. We did advertise for a public hearing on what will be Resolution 18-7. Any public testimony tonight on this item? Kevin? Still here.
Still here, still awake. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Adam brought this and talked about this at our board retreat a few weeks ago. Didn't stir up any controversy. I would agree with him, and I have learned the lesson of incremental, frequent raises as opposed to once every 30 years is probably the best way to go. You'll hear a little blowback on this from some people, I'm sure, but all things considered, the chamber feels is fair and encourages you to move forward.
Great. Thanks, Kevin. Appreciate the comments. Further comment from the public? Not seeing any. I'll close the public hearing and turn it back to the council for a motion.
I'll take a turn.
Frank.
I would move to approve Resolution 18-7, a resolution approving changes to the business license fee structure and an increase in the business license fees and short-term rental application fees.
Second.
Seconded by Councilor Hennon. Further discussion on the motion? Frank.
We'll vote on this second. At some point, I think it would be fair to address John's question earlier about if you want to do a short-term rental, what are my costs going to be when I come in for my, total? What do I have to pay? We ought to address that. And we
That was my question.
Okay, fine. So thank you.
And we can do that. So essentially, you're going to pay $100 for your application fee plus $50 for every unit that you have. Is that correct? Plus, that's correct.
Yeah, so there's two different fees, there's a first initial short-term rental application fee. So that's just because there's an additional process for short-term rentals. But you also have your annual business license fee, so that's every year. So that would be $100 plus $50 per short-term rental unit. So it could be your initial one would be $250, future years would be $150 for one rental home. And then moving forward, if you had more homes added, $50 per one.
Plus the bed tax. Plus the resort tax.
Yep, so resort tax is collected from their customers, and so that's remitted on behalf of the entity, and they get to keep 5%, so they do get some compensation for collecting the resort tax for us.
Further questions, comments? All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. And those opposed, like sign, and that carries unanimously as well. We'll move on to our authorization to proceed to bid the Summers Avenue reconstruction project. Craig.
Thank you very much. My staff report begins on page 292 of your packet. I'm going to pretend like I'm a member of the public here and try and keep this to 3 minutes or less. That said, after I get through this,
Bill will like that.
If you have questions, please don't hesitate to ask. So this is the next resort tax project up on our list, Summers Avenue, where we're proposing to reconstruct Summers Avenue from East 2nd Street to East 8th Street. As with all of our projects where we spend more than $20,000 in consulting, we did come to council to approve an engineering contract that happened last January. We did advertise for bids. Robert Pesh and Associates was selected. Typically, the first process after the engineers are selected involves public involvement, and I will tell you that we have had considerable public outreach and involvement in this project. We've had, to date, 3 newsletters and 2 public hearings, or excuse me, 2 public information meetings. Assuming everything goes well tonight and we move forward with bidding and get the bids out, we'll have a 3rd and final public info meeting in April before construction. So just a few quick highlights on the project. Summers Avenue is in terms of road reconstruction projects, one of the more simple jobs that we're doing, where we're not making considerable changes to the profile of the road. It will remain basically a 30-foot paved road, 2 feet of curb and gutter on each side, an 8-foot terrace, and then a 5-foot sidewalk. We're not making significant changes to elevation, although some of the intersections will change a little bit just to get the stormwater to work a little bit better. A few minor notes on the project itself. We did make a decision through the public comment and from a safety perspective that we do want to eliminate all of the uncontrolled intersections on this roadway. There's currently two intersections that have no stop signs, East 3rd and East 5th. And so I do give you some detail in there, but there will be at least a one-way stop on each of the intersections throughout the project. One of the interesting things that we found out in actually the first public meeting was many of the homeowners do have active sump pumps on this roadway. This isn't an area that we had identified with high groundwater or a lot of basements or crawl spaces, but it did become evident that property owners were looking for an outlet for their sump pumps. So we did design into this project a relatively shallow sump pump collection system. That's included in the designs. We also went through a pretty rigorous tree inventory, and we're proposing removal of about 40 mature green ash trees. This was met with both praise and some criticism through the public, but in discussing basically the necessity in our mind of removing some of these green ash trees, I think the block is much happier with the outcome of the project. There were a fair number of mature ash trees that were selected to remain both through public comment and through our evaluation. We are proposing to upgrade this street with our standard lighting package. So there will be new street lights about every 100 feet. We are proposing to equip these with LED lights, but that will be a future order, and it'll be based on comment from a future council meeting, as we discussed earlier tonight. Traffic and control. The one interesting thing to note in this project is we talked early on to the residents about the schedule of the project, sort of giving them the option to maintain through traffic throughout construction with a longer construction window, or just basically shutting the roadway down and decreasing the construction time frame. And it was fairly unanimous at that first and then again at the second meeting that the block would much rather decrease the window of time on the construction project and close the road. And so we are proposing to do that. The roadway will be closed to through traffic basically from the day that school's out until the day that construction is completed. And in doing so, because we'll be greatly limiting the amount of parking on street, we've come up with a scheme to allow some additional on-street parking at some of the closed intersections. There'll be through traffic across Summers Avenue at 4th, 6th, 7th, and 8th. And then where we're closing it at 3rd and 5th, we'll be adding some temporary striping to allow for some head-in parking. We're estimating about 60 additional parking stalls will be created. So those properties that don't have parking in the alley behind will have some additional space to park when the road's closed this summer. So assuming everything goes well tonight, and you guys authorize the bidding, we will go forward and advertise. We hope to open bids on the 15th of March. We would then bring the contract back to council for an award on April 2nd. Begin construction with what we're calling kind of a soft start, May 21st. That would allow the contractor to begin work between 7th and 8th Street. And then on the 11th of June, after school is out, full road closure and full site construction access with completion the 18th of August. In terms of the current project costs, we're estimating at this point a $2.2 million contract or complete construction project. That includes engineering and the street lighting. I will note that this is about $300,000 over what we're estimating in the CIP. There have been some changes in the project as we went through design and public comment, most notably that sump pump collection system. So in an effort to reduce costs, we could either eliminate the sump pump collection system after bid or even bid it as an alternate. Again, that's the current estimate, so I think when we come back to project award, we're going to want to look a little more closely at the resort tax dollars available and the project as bid. So that pretty much sums up the high points. Based on that, I do humbly request that council award or approve the project to go to bid.
Thanks, Craig. Any questions for Craig? Richard?
Any concerns, Chief Dial, or if you can speak for Chief Page about emergency services, if that whole street is blocked off? Do you feel like you can continue to, if they do it in the short period of time, which they're proposing, is that going to cause you any heartburn? Okay. The 40 trees, are any of those going to be replaced, and if so, with what caliper? And do they qualify for the Adopt a Tree program for the homeowners that are in that neighborhood?
They do, yeah. We'll be talking to homeowners. We've actually begun talking to homeowners who are having trees removed from their boulevard, and they will be replaced. We'll work with the Parks Department and the property owner to get a suitable replacement. In terms of tree caliper, I believe the trees on the list are a 2-inch, but they do have the option, or will have the option, to pay additional if they want a larger tree.
Okay. I think that's it. Oh, on the sumps. I understand that the city will benefit by getting the water so it doesn't have to go through the water treatment plant, the wastewater treatment plant. But on the other hand, those are illegal sumps to begin with. And so it concerns me a little bit that we're taking a look at least at some illegal activity and trying to help. I mean, I understand the give and take here, but can you talk about the rationale here a little bit more?
Yeah, I guess, so the rationale is, we're well aware of the fact that it's not only illegal in city code, but also in state plumbing code to have sump pumps connected to the sanitary sewer. The struggle that most communities have with requiring the disconnection, or actually complying with that code, is the property owners typically don't have another outlet for that sump pump. They pump it out into their yard, it's recycled back in, oftentimes it floods their basement, and then there's potential liability there on the city's part for requiring that disconnection. There are cities that have done full-blown sump pump collection systems citywide. Oftentimes it does allow sump pump discharge to the curb where there is flowing curb and storm sewer existing to take it. It does typically involve some amount of infrastructure be added to the system, and so with this project, we're sort of at least setting the precedent of that first sump pump collection system. We haven't done any, to my knowledge, anywhere else in the system, but after this project is complete and the collection system is in, and then we would plan to do a door-to-door inspection to make sure that people are not illegally connected.
Okay, thanks.
Motion? Frank?
I would move to, where are we here? Move to approve that we go out to bid.
A second.
Further discussion on the motion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and that's unanimous. Michelle? Which brings us on to item 8A, which will be ordinance 18-7, amending Chapter 5 of the Police Commission to Title 2 of the Whitefish Code to remove the requirement that the Police Commission meet 4 times a year. Angie?
Good evening. My goal will be to be shorter than Craig. This is basically just a housekeeping amendment. Montana law requires us to have a police commission because we have more than 3 full-time law enforcement officials. And basically, the police commission is charged with examining applicants and with being hearing and deciding appeals brought by police officers with respect to discipline and termination. We have created a police commission, and for whatever reason, our ordinance requires that it meet 4 times a year, even if it doesn't have any business in front of it. State law does not require that. It doesn't require it meet any certain amount of time. So Chief Dial asked me to bring forth an amendment that would just basically get rid of that requirement, and the commission can just meet when they have business rather than having 4 meetings when they have nothing to meet about. So that is exactly what the amendment in front of you does. It also corrects a weird typo that was in the code. So staff respectfully recommends that the city council adopt ordinance 1807.
Thanks, Angie. Motion?
Would move to approve ordinance 1807, an ordinance amending Chapter 5 of the Police Commission to Title 2 of the Whitefish City Code to remove the requirement that the Police Commission meet 4 times a year.
I second.
Further discussion on the motion? That was seconded by Katie. Michelle? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, and it's unanimous as well, which brings us on to item 9A, which will be resolution 18-8, a resolution to authorize the purchase, to participate in the intercap loan program to purchase a 2018 Dodge 4x4 ambulance. Dana.
Thank you, Mayor and City Councilors. The FY18 budget provides for the purchase of a new ambulance for the fire department with anticipated financing through the intercap program through the Montana Board of Investments for an amount up to $175,000. The remaining amount that was approved by council is roughly $25,000 or just slightly there above, and that would be paid with cash on hand. The intercap loan program, we've utilized this before for other fire equipment and emergency response vehicles. This will be a loan over 5 years and at 2.5% interest through February 15th this month. It is a very variable interest rate loan, but historically the rates have been well below other sources and have not exceeded 2.5% over the past 3 years. I am anticipating an increase just based on the market, but I don't think that it would be significant. The annual debt service payment is estimated at approximately $37,450, and there is no penalty for early payoff of the loan. City Attorney Angela Jacobs has reviewed the proposed resolution, and we have a tentative closing scheduled for the 16th if all goes well, and the ambulance should be arriving late next week. So staff respectfully recommends that the City Council approve the proposed resolution 18-8 that authorizes participation in the intercap loan program, approving the form and terms of the loan agreement, and authorizing the execution and delivery of documents related thereto.
Thanks, Dana. Questions or a motion?
I'll move to approve Resolution 18-08, a resolution to authorize participation in the intercap loan program to purchase a 2018 Dodge 4x4 ambulance.
I second.
Seconded by Councilor Williams. Any comments on the motion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and that's unanimous. Michelle, we'll stay with Dana for our mid-year financial snapshot report.
All right, yeah, snapshot. Well, there is a detailed report on page 361 of your packet that I won't be going through completely. All is well at the city financially. So overall, we've seen an increase in cash in our property tax supported funds. About 20%, which we can expect with increased reserves through the budget process for fiscal year 18. We're really just setting ourselves up to be resilient through the next economic downturn. Some just highlights that I'd like to touch on. Parks and Rec, we're continuing to see that fund improve, which is great. It's improving with an additional transfer from the general fund, but also an increase in the maintenance assessment. Again, all departments that I'm seeing so far have been very carefully monitoring their expenditures. Law enforcement fund has turned around and is looking great as well with increased cash. The only one that actually had a decrease for our property tax supported funds is the library fund. It's not concerning. It's budgeted and anticipated that they'd be spending some money on improvements. They do have a slight downturn in revenue, but often we see those pick up toward the end of the year when they start getting donations from their contributors. So just a couple other highlights. The municipal court fines and forfeitures through the end of the second quarter, December 31st, again are still up. They've increased 19% from the prior year. Obviously, we have a new judge who started January 1, so I'm excited to see how this changes over the next 6 months, just with the transition that's going on. Resort tax collections are up excuse me, are 10% higher than last year at this time, and are 65% of the budget. So again, if this continues, we'll see additional property tax relief potentially for taxpayers within Whitefish. And most of the increase we're seeing is in lodging. Just kind of the recent trends I'm seeing is retail is really pulling through again. So, and bars and restaurants are also seeing just kind of their standard increase. So that's good news. Ambulance service charges are up. Again, we're focusing on, collections of that. We are looking at some proposals for possibly changing a billing services, just to make sure that what we're billing out, we are collecting. Again, kind of just the building economics going on, building license and permit revenues are up about 33% from the prior year at this time, and are 58% of the budget. So we've seen the first half of fiscal year 18 has proven to be very strong, with both commercial and residential activity remaining high. Columbia Falls is actually behind us a little bit. They're only 9% up compared to last year, but they also had a really strong year last year. So with building permits and licenses up, you'll see the impact fees are also up. Planning fees are actually up at this point. We are 137% of expected revenue for this year, which is a good indicator for continued development in the city and potentially future business, or excuse me, not business, building licenses, or building permits, excuse me. Total expenditures by fund were all below the typical percentage around this time. There is one fund that we have exceeded our budget. It's a construction fund for the Whitefish Trail. It is simply a budgeting difference. The Haskell Basin Trail project, they've moved forward, been able to do more with more funds that they had available. While this is an overage that will require budget amendment at year end, we have the offsetting revenue that's coming in from Whitefish Legacy Partners and their grants that will offset that. So it won't impact reserves whatsoever for the city. And so overall, we'll just continue to monitor repair and maintenance expenses and other line items that are more heavily used by the city. Metered water sales and wastewater service charges are both up around 20%. I provided some graphs for you to look at. You can kind of see where water has an impact based on the amount of precipitation we receive in the summer, and then you'll see how it kind of evens out, back out. We didn't do a very significant increase this last October for water fees. Wastewater, on the other hand, we did have an increase again as we plan for the wastewater treatment plant, so you can see a little bit higher jump in the graph from the prior years. But again, we trend the same. So, one more page. Everything is looking good at the city. We'll continue to monitor the remainder of the fiscal year as we enter the early stages of our 5-year capital improvement plan update and begin preparing for the fiscal year 19 budget already. We look forward to the challenges of preparing a budget that not only provides for the expected levels of service from our visitors and citizens, but also takes into consideration the possibilities for growth and increased fortitude of the city's finances. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thanks, Dan. I think that's one of the more positive reports I've heard in 13 years. So thank you for that. I know it's a reflection of your hard work and staff's hard work. Any questions for Dana? Okay, we'll move on. We have Adam's report enclosed with the packet. Any questions for Adam? Any other items to report on? Thanks. We'll stay with Adam, and we discussed this during our work session regarding the Tier 1 strategies for the strategic housing plan and the expense considerations that we reviewed in our work session earlier this evening. Adam.
Well, I know there's going to be some further discussion based on what we discussed in our work session. A couple little highlights, just since we're kind of on the record here at this point. But the steering committee for the Whitefish strategic housing plan just wanted to make sure they were on the right track with the first 4 tiers, or the first 4 strategies of Tier 1 in the plan. And so those are the snow lot, inclusionary zoning, annexation policy, and zoning for affordability. As they move forward, they just want to make sure that they have, the blessing of the council, that they're in the right direction and doing the right thing. Also, we wanted to earmark some money for expenditures on a few things. On the snow lot, there's about $30,000 of expenditures that we may have yet in this fiscal year. About 15,000 of that's going to go towards a phase 2 environmental assessment of the snow lot, and then also about 15,000 would go towards conceptual design contest, much like we did with City Hall back when. That 15,000 for the conceptual design may not happen by the end of June. Most likely will not, but if everything just goes great and gangbusters, who knows what might happen. So we thought we would get that earmarked now, but it may just slide over into fiscal year 2019 budget. With inclusionary zoning, one of the things we discussed at the steering committee was just kind of adding to the workload that Reese Consulting LLC did for us as part of the ongoing housing saga. We got about a $20,000 price tag from them to take us through inclusionary zoning, which will end up with a deliverable, which will be a draft ordinance, or that'll be ready for approval for the council, and also for annexation policy. And that was about $5,000 for the annexation policy, same deliverable. The zoning for affordability, one of the things that Melanie from Reese Consulting suggested was just kind of put a placeholder in there so that we had money for any technical expertise that we may need as we start to consider some of those things. The steering committee hasn't done a deep dive down into the various elements of zoning for affordability just yet, but that will be upcoming and ongoing, and we'll kind of see how that goes. We may see some further expenditures into the future. Along those lines, I agree with Dana. We're doing pretty well fiscally as a city, but nevertheless, I do know that this is a partnership with the Whitefish Chamber and the Whitefish Housing Authority. So I have asked them to help contribute to some of the consulting costs and things that we have ongoing, so we can just kind of continue the partnership as we continue moving forward with what I think we all think is a major priority for the community. So I have asked the same of the Housing Authority as well, so we'll wait and see what their boards have to say in helping to move forward in this cooperative effort.
Thanks, Adam. Questions for Adam? Not seeing any. I think what we do need, do you want a formal motion, Adam?
Yeah, it would be nice.
Adopting the policies as well as the line items you've laid out?
I mean, they're pretty well laid out and enumerated in the plan, but just kind of a final little,
reaffirmation.
We've been thinking about this, we've looked at all these kind of things, and then just know too that, all these policy changes and ordinances are gonna come back for your approval as well.
Okay. So are there any discussion points or comments, or if we're all on board, we'll just need a motion, adopting the financial information that Adam presented in his staff report, and just as a general policy decision that we're going to pursue affordable housing and development of the snow lot, which will start with the phase 2 environmental assessment. We will be moving forward with inclusionary zoning, changes to our annexation policy, and pursuing zoning for affordability. So a motion to that effect would be helpful.
So moved.
Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Seconded by Councilor Hennon. Further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and that carries unanimously. Thanks, Adam.
Yep, thank you.
Finally, Kevin.
You got 5 minutes.
We'll move on to item 11A, which is the letter we received from the Whitefish Chamber of Commerce requesting that we postpone demolition and reconsider a lease with the Whitefish Chamber of Commerce for the Depot Park building. You received a copy of the letter, my response to Mr. Graves, as well as the Chamber of Commerce. That's included in the packet as well. I indicated to the Chamber that we would certainly be willing to hear them, whether or not our standing decision from several months ago remains is to be at your discretion. In order to move this forward onto a future council agenda, will require 3 votes of the council along with concurrence of both myself and Adam, or 4 votes of the council with Adam's concurrence. So just so you know, that's how the policy is set, and that's how we'll move forward with this item this evening. Katie?
Well, I'm just going to lob it out there. Would you like me to make a motion, or should I speak first before?
I would throw out a motion first.
Okay, I would move to add to the next agenda the option to postpone demolishing Depot Park building and look into leasing the space to the Whitefish Chamber of Commerce.
Is there a second to that motion? And the motion does fail for lack of a second. Which, we've been here before, Kevin. I hope you can appreciate the city's position on this. I think it was well articulated in our letter. I think things have changed since 8-9 months ago. And I think our comments stand for the record, but please let the chamber know that we, respect their point of view on this. Obviously, we feel a bit differently, and we're moving forward as adopted in our downtown master plan and the adopted Depot Park master plan. So thanks for your time tonight. I know it's not the answer you were hoping for, but it is what it is. Thanks, Kevin. On that note, we will move to councilor comments. Who would like to begin tonight?
The agenda?
That's right. Thanks, Michelle. So are there any other comments on item 5 of our work agenda regarding the 93 South Corridor plan? We reviewed the boundary, and I believe we briefly discussed the composition of the committee.
Just to be on the safe side, I'll move to extend the meeting this evening since if that's the official clock, we have 3 minutes. So I'll move to extend.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
With enthusiasm.
Okay.
Who seconded?
Katie? Any comments, questions for staff on what we reviewed in the work session?
May I?
Frank, yeah.
I still want to, for us to be able to address this issue, and I'm not comfortable yet that the proposed makeup of the committee, which does allow for 2, quote, Whitefish residents to be included, would be inclusive enough to include those people that might be affected that otherwise would be in what I'll call the Carroll Avenue neighborhood plan or the South Whitefish neighborhood plan. I want to ensure that however we design that committee, that we have an option to include those that would be covered by such things and yet may not be technically Whitefish city citizens. Is there a way to do that, David?
Well, I mean, you have 2 at-large positions, so that those positions could be in or out.
But
You
they
could
say
have one
they
city
say
council.
Whitefish residents.
It could say 1 city resident, one resident of the corridor. Within the study, if you're looking for outside that corridor, I mean, you can word it however you want to make sure. You could say one, or residential property owner, immediately outside of the corridor. I don't know how broad you want to make it. When we did our Wisconsin Avenue corridor, we actually had a hard time filling all the positions that we came up with. So it's going to depend on who applies, I guess, but hopefully now that's only a 9-person committee. I think that one was 14, so yeah, this might be easier. But I guess it's how you want to draft that as far as Hillary's suggestions were, besides the council members and the planning board representative, 2 at-large city or Whitefish residents. You could say 1 at-large resident, 1 at-large, non-city resident or county resident. You have 2 business owners in the corridor. Obviously, that's probably going to be, within the corridor. And then 2 residential owner-occupied property owners in the corridor with or beyond city limits. So, I mean, there's room within that for 2 or 3 people that weren't city residents within her suggestions.
I guess I would like an opportunity to talk through this issue with Hillary and you to get comfortable that it's going to have an opportunity for those folks to be included that I was just talking about. If I get comfortable with that, I'm fine, but I'm not at this particular sitting, if that helps anybody around here. But so that's, at least that's my current feeling. I'm happy to do that in short order. Are we looking to move forward on this thing? What's our timeline? If somebody wants to tell me we're already covered, I'm fine. I'm just not comfortable with it at this point.
What is the timeline, Dave?
Well, I mean, it depends
Hillary's
on you guys. We wanted to at least get approval so that we can advertise. It's gonna be a couple of month process probably to get all the people in and set interviews up so the council can get their interviews together. We're just trying to move this process forward so we can start the planning process.
I'm good with that. What, go ahead.
You're okay with the composition?
No, I'm not. I'm okay with his process.
What would you like to see differently?
I guess I'd like an opportunity to look at that language and make sure that those folks could participate, John. I'm not comfortable knowing what I know about how the articulation of how the at-large seats are articulated. I'd like to expand that. Maybe we only have those 2 at-large, but it needs to say something to the effect of, and they may be non-Whitefish City residents that live within Whitefish that are affected by the corridor study. And I mean, I want to have some inclusion for those folks because I think that's important. Is there a way for us, do you want me to work with them?
Yeah, I think just to move this forward, I mean, I don't know how the council feels, but if you and Dave agree on a composition that works for you, I trust that we've covered our bases, and I guess that's the decision of the council, if they agree with me or not, but it would provide you an opportunity to sit down with Dave, so we're not postponing this further.
And I'm good with that. If you
have
guys
the
are good
time
with that.
and you have
Okay.
Is that okay with the council? Yeah. Richard? Okay. Dave, you're good with that?
Sure.
Thanks.
Yeah, we can do that later this week. I'm around, so.
Okay. Thanks, Frank. Councilor comments. Melissa, would you like to start, if any?
No comments.
Thanks. Frank?
No real comments this evening. Thanks, Frank.
Thank you. Katie?
I did want to address first, Tom had a concern about the speed limit by the golf course, changing from 45 to 35, and I do know that Craig actually looked into this about a year ago. And do you mind giving us a wee bit of an update as to what MDOT has said to you?
Yeah, the process to change a speed limit on a state highway first involves what MDT refers to as a speed study. That speed study has been initiated. It could be as long as a 3-year process, so I'll keep you posted.
Thank you.
Speedy.
Yeah, it's speeding. Second, I'd like to thank our police, public works, fire, city staff for doing an exceptionally great job of securing, protecting, and making Whitefish Winter Carnival a standout event again this year. It was a huge success, at least from the purview of where I was standing and running around. So thank you very much. And then finally, I just will speak briefly to my earlier motion. I do not want it to be misconstrued in any way in disrespect to the steering committee, the council, citizens, and also city staff. I appreciate the public process wholeheartedly. I do believe that circumstances had changed a year ago and are still as such. And so I maintain that. I did go back and forth as to whether or not to even bring it up because the mayor so very eloquently wrote a letter describing the city's position. And now it's time to just move forward and let Depot Park become the place where everyone's going to gather, make money, and hang out and have a good time.
I'm going to hang out in the park, make some money.
No comment from me.
I heard it. I said it.
I'm not going to comment on that.
It's past 11:05.
Thanks, Katie.
I'm going to bed.
Ryan?
No comment from me.
Richard, thanks.
I want to just kind of also give a shout out to, where'd Chief Dial go?
He's there.
Oh, there, I couldn't see it. To police, fire, and public works. I know that I was really concerned about the traffic parking on 4th Street between Baker and the Mountain View Manor, if we had to get an ambulance into the manor. And they limited parking on one side of the street there. I got that request from some of my neighbors and forwarded it on, and nice job. Thanks, everybody, for doing that. I guess I'd take that 45 off on 93 in front of the golf course. And at one point, we were going to have a committee to look at, and I think I volunteered for that, on how to reduce the packet size. And I'd like to, when we have time, sit down and look at ways that we can reduce, take away some of the redundancies that are in the packet, and just for the public, being able to get through it more quickly.
I would be more than happy to help if you need assistance too.
And I think a similar goal isn't just reducing the size of the packet, but how it's formatted and or organized, more importantly, or equally importantly, in my opinion, when we discussed this last November.
I don't think we need to drop everything that's in process right now, but it's something I don't want to lose sight of.
I agree. I'll be brief. Katie, you brought up at the beginning of the meeting the LLAC and that you had made progress regarding the roles and responsibilities. Is this something you'd like added to a future council agenda or not?
That was my question for the council. If you would like to see that, just to kind of give an overview as to what the partnership between the city and Whitefish Legacy Partners looks like on paper, I think we should add it in for review. It has passed through the LLAC and both members have adopted it, so it's up to the desire of the council.
I think that would be worthwhile. We discussed that at our work session with Legacy Partners, is more or less an informal addendum to the memorandum of understanding that we have with WLP. So I think that would be a great move. We'll just need the showing of hands. Would you guys like to see that on a future agenda? I'll see all 5 hands. I'll support that. Adam will as well. Actually, you don't need me. As long as you have 4 hands, you just need Adam. Craig, Suzanne at the beginning of the meeting brought up the speed concerns on First Street. Do you mind just walking down in that area at your convenience one day and just seeing if you have any problems with not only the speed limit, but if it indeed warrants additional signage at O'Brien and Miles, stop signs?
Can I take Chief Dial with me?
Absolutely.
All right. Yeah, then I'll do it.
Yeah. Just assess the situation. If it warrants moving forward with something, great. If not, Chief.
John, just one thing to keep in mind. Everybody says stop signs, stop signs, stop signs. They do not reduce speed. There's a lot of research out there showing that.
Sure.
And I doubt if people are going 45 miles an hour on First Street.
Okay. Appreciate you looking into that. Anything further from staff? We're adjourned. Thanks.
Yes, we'll get him home. We'll see you tomorrow.